epic fury, one of the largest, most complex, most overwhelming military offensives the world has ever seen. Nobody's seen anything like it. We have hit hundreds of targets in Iran, including Revolutionary Guard facilities, Iranian air defense systems. Just now, it was announced that we knocked out 9 ships plus their naval building, all in a matter of literally minutes. Iran's formerly supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead.
I spoke to you about the situation in the Gulf and explained that the United Kingdom was not involved in the strikes on Iran. That remains the case. The basis of our decision is the collective self-defence of long-standing friends and allies and protecting British lives. That is in accordance with international law, and we are publishing a summary of our legal advice. We are not joining these strikes, but we will continue with our defensive actions in the region.
Mr Farage, would a reform government have allowed US forces to use UK air bases for offensive operations in Iran?
Yes is the answer to your question. I would have said to the Americans, please do use our bases. We will be supportive of you on this.
There were a series of very loud blasts in the area of Dubai that I'm based in. That's in the marina area. It's a very touristy area, actually. Those blasts were the loudest we've heard yet, but equally we are reassured that they are most likely the sound of interception by the UAE's quite sophisticated THAAD interception kit. That is the Terminal High Altitude Area Defence System.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning. Happy Friday, one and all. How are you doing? Are you recovered from having a nice little break after Easter and then being cold plunged at the deep end straight back into work? I hope you're doing very well. Don't you worry, the weekend is coming. It's just round the corner. So let's kick off on a cheery note, shall we? By the way, I've got a very important press conference I want to deliver just before we get started. Just in case anyone was wondering, I don't know Peter Mandelson. I mean, you know, we're both in politics. We mixed in the same circles. We might have been at some events together, but I've never really been invited to his house. I've never been involved with any of his, strange deals. Just wanted to clear that up before anyone tries to tarnish my good name. What was going on there? I mean, the weird, what is that? It's the oddest thing I have seen. Well, in the last about 2 hours, basically. Lots of odd things going on, as per usual, in the news. Do you know what? I think the only way to navigate extremes of bizarreness, trying to get to the kernel of truth outside all the sort of fruitiness that surrounds it, the only way to do that is with a very sensible man, my brethren from the land of Gloucester, the former Conservative Government Advisor, Mr James Price. Good morning, James.
I'm glad you're coming to me for an island of sanity. It's not always like that, but I'm very glad to be that compared to all the madness that's out there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to understand anything going on at the moment. It's just mind-boggling. I feel like I've just given up. I've given up trying to get it. Apparently, Sir Keir Starmer's given up trying to get Donald Trump. He's fed up with him, apparently. I mean, astonishing, I would say, turning around and going, I'm fed up with the fact that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin do all these things to raise energy prices and British businesses are affected. And I'm like, what? you do realise that your energy secretary is actually the problem. You do realise your zealous push for net zero, now you've dynamically aligned with the EU, is part of the problem. You do realise that actually we could be cashing in as 40s blend oil, which comes out of the North Sea, which we could be getting out of the North Sea, is now at record high prices. Yes, Brent crude was stabilised a little bit, but the exact oil that we have access to could be making us a fortune. But instead, no. Instead, let's complain about everyone else. Let's blame everyone else and not our own policies. Well, the Chancellor makes a killing, robbing us blind on all of those extra levies, VAT, green taxes, all put on our fuel bills, crippling British industry. I mean, the shtick of this man, James, make that make sense.
It is really funny, isn't it? I mean, this is the point I've got to you, because if you don't laugh, you will end up crying at the state of things at the moment. I'm choosing to find this darkly funny that Keir Starmer spent all these years thinking he was a super clever guy, and then spent years telling us all how evil the Tories were. And as soon as you get rid of the evil, mean, nasty Tories, suddenly everything will be like living in Arcadia and it will all be lovely and marvellous, only for the guy to get repeatedly, metaphorically, bitched out round the face multiple times by reality for years, right? He's finally realised, things are a bit more complicated than the very 2D way that he has looked at the world. And the energy crisis that you point to, Alex, is a perfect example of this, right? He's sitting there going, why is it that we're so buffeted by events around the world? This is so difficult, yada, yada, yada. Meanwhile, exactly as you say, the most dangerous man in Britain, a.k.a. Ed Miliband, a.k.a. the man the British public roundly rejected at the ballot, 11 years ago now, is tying both hands behind our back at the same time that, again, as you say, energy prices are rising and we're all looking at a very painful winter coming up. Miliband is trying to literally pour concrete over various areas where we could start fracking, is switching off North Sea oil and gas, all the things that we could do to stop Granny from freezing to death in her cottage this coming winter, or that would actually make British, business competitive again. We're seeing big investments stopping coming into this country. I think OpenAI announced yesterday they will not be expanding things into Britain because the energy prices are just too high. And Starmer is sitting there as if he's got no agency in the world about it. It is, again, it's funny. You've just got to laugh at this. The Prime Minister doesn't understand the Constitution, doesn't understand simplicities of supply and demand, and doesn't understand how he's going to get the country out of this situation. The only silver lining, make me laugh a bit more, is that I suspect that after the local elections coming out, he'll be out of a job.
But who will replace him? I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? It could actually be Red Ed. But, I mean, also the absolutely terrifying state of our armed forces. I mean, the fact that John Sweeney says, oh, yeah, we see you, Vladimir Putin, escorting your sanctioned oil tanker through the channel, which, in parts is one of the narrowest water straits in the world. And the sort of ridiculous farce, basically, the sketch of this oil tanker, massive girt thing chugging along through the tanker when Starmer said, we're going to intercept any of these, we're going to make sure that they can't sell their contraband product on the high seas. And Putin's like, do you know what would be funny? Let's just take it right past Dover, right past Portsmouth and see what they do, shall we? And you had that thing going through the channel, being escorted by a big, scary Russian frigate or something, some sort of boat of war, and then behind it, our boat following it. And it's just, it's like a Laurel and Hardy show. You almost want to watch a video with like, except it's not funny. It's not funny because what Putin has been able to prove, I would suggest, with sending nuclear subs down to sniff about our undersea cables and audaciously charging not only one of these sanctioned vessels through the channel, but following it with a Russian warship, is he has been able to prove if we wanted to, we can get right up to your coastline. We're not going to be intercepted, and you have no defence. HMS Dragon, 3 weeks to get out to the theatre of war, suddenly has issues with its water supply and has to go back. I just think the only thing saving us right now is nobody really wants to invade us, because what is there to take?
It's depressing to have to talk about the tough times that we're in every week that we speak, Alex. But you're right. This is this is cause for a very serious reflection and look at ourselves and our levels of national security, national resilience. It's not just about numbers of troops, numbers of tanks, or even numbers of ships, although it is kind of about numbers of ships because we haven't got very many. When the Americans paused on their ceasefire this past week, they pointed out they'd sunk 150 Iranian ships, which is 90-odd% of Iran's navy. Much bigger navy than we've got at the moment. It's terrifying to say. It's not just about that, though. I think it is about the general seriousness with which we take these kinds of issues, the way that we're willing to, not just funding, although that is important, but how you spend the money that we allocate to these things. You've still got a lot of vested interests pushing for things like Ajax in the army that doesn't work, frankly, that makes the people driving in them feel sick. And I think there was a pretty disgraceful report that came out and said, oh, that's the soldiers driving them wrong. So it's about the way that we spend this money as well, and the general recognition inside the government, not just the Labour Party, I'm afraid, officials and civil servants and all the rest as well, and I'll be honest, previous Conservative governments too, that we, I think, kitted out the country for the kind of enemies that the Treasury told us we could afford to face, rather than the threats that we actually face. And again, I talked about Starmer being slapped by reality. This is what happens when you don't have enough defence, and suddenly, again, the Russians are able to do what they've done in the English Channel. It's absolutely humiliating. And of course, the biggest line of defence that we probably had from that shadow fleet going by were the Russian ships dodging the small boats carrying third world migrants into the country. Not much of a defence, is it?
Not much of a defence at all. But I'm looking now at UK defence spending since the end of the Cold War. And whilst we all want to chortle and laugh at the Labour Party and Sir Keir Starmer because they are hopeless, frankly, the lowest point, the nadir in all of this, was under David Cameron. I'm looking at the statistics right now. Early 90s, we were spending 3.3 to 4% of our GDP on defence, which in real terms was 50 to 55 billion. Of course, that figure you'd expect to go up because you'd expect GDP with everything increasing over the course of history. Then you reach sort of 2015, it drops down to 2%. 2016, 2017, 1.8%. 2018, 1.9%. So, you know, it's not just all about the Labour government. The Conservatives failed dreadfully on this as well, didn't they?
Yeah, that's right. I think that's fair to say. I think after the end of the Cold War, the world had an assumption that we're moving into the end of history, and European countries, the Western European countries in particular, that did spend a lot of money on defence during the Cold War, thought they would reap what they called the peace dividend. And the Americans as well, to an extent, although not nearly as much. And at that time, we then went into some disastrous wars in the Middle East, where, again, Labour sent our troops in totally under-prepared, under-armoured and all the rest of it. It was a total dereliction of duty from Tony Blair and Gordon Brown and the Labour Party. And then the Tories came in, and you say, Alex, and they inherited a horrendous mess, did a good job, really, at sorting out the public finances. It's not a very sexy thing to do, having to reduce spending in areas, because it's easy, let's remember, to be generous when you're spending other people's money. But you're right, not nearly enough care and attention was paid to what might be challenges and threats facing us into the future. And the Conservatives definitely take their share of blame. But let's look now at what Labour are doing at the same time as they've promised us economic growth. There's none. They promised us they'd get a house in order. There's none. And I think, Alex, what's happened is that over the last almost 2 years now that Starmer has been Prime Minister and Labour have been back in, they've looked at these sorts of difficult decisions. The idea that you might have to cut welfare spending, that you might actually have to reform the NHS to, or I don't know, stop the doctors going on strike like they are this week. They don't like that stuff. And so they are falling back on their traditional comfort areas of taxing people who work hard to give to people who don't, and bowing to their trade union masters. Let's not forget this week, slipped out in a consultation reply, their government has said that they will change the law to force every single company in the country who hires more than 20 members of staff, so let's think about all those small and medium-sized businesses who employ between, 21 and 250 odd people, that trade unions will have to be granted access to start meddling in those small companies. We've just had Easter, and now the government is forcing these small companies to be cracked open like an egg to let the trade unions feast on them. And I've seen reporting that that will cost something like 600 million quid a year from small businesses. And think about the effect of the trade unions meddling in private enterprise. That's what Labour care about. They're paying attention to things like that rather than Russian warships sailing along our coast. It's enough to make a cat laugh, honestly.
The problem, I think, for Starmer, though, is He's in stalemate, isn't he? Even if he wanted to do the things that desperately need to be done, heavily invest in defence, massively cut the welfare bill, push meddling trade unions out of the way, including their beloved Rayner's workers' rights bill, which is going to have an egregious impact upon employers. He can't do it because his job, his position, his party, quite frankly, and being in government depend upon it. He knows that you cannot essentially put a gun between the eyes of the person who pays for you, who calls the shots, who's put you inside number 10. And unfortunately, when it comes to the unions and their extreme leftist agenda and his backbenchers, I'm afraid they've all got him by the short and curlies.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And Starmer has that look about him at this point, doesn't he? He sort of knows he's trapped. There's one of those fun, long, compound German words for when you're playing chess, and every move that you make puts you into a weaker and worse position. I can't remember the German word.
I wanted to know what the German word was then. I was waiting for it.
Next time I'll get it for you. But I think that's the situation in which Starmer now finds himself. Everything he does makes him weaker because he's played a very strong hand, that massive, massive majority, unbelievably poorly. Let's not forget the attempts to cut welfare last year, and one Labour backbench said, I don't get it, it's just a couple of billion quid. What are the markets complaining about? Showing they haven't got a Scooby about how anything works. Or the fact that, let's just do a few greatest hits, shall we? The fact that the Chancellor lied about her CV and doesn't actually understand anything about the economy. The fact we just mentioned the Energy Secretary and what he's doing. We forgot about the Justice Secretary cancelling down jury trials, or the Education Secretary undoing, decades now of consensus on how to improve education that's made England's schools the best in the West. She's throwing all of that out again. We could go on and on and on. The whole thing is such a shambles. And again, what are Labour going to do? They're just going to go back to their comfort zones. They'll attack people that want to work hard. They'll take your property and your money off you. They'll let in people from the third world and say they're just as British as you are, even though they go around committing crimes. And they don't care. They're going to get turfed out at the next election. But we might see some unholy alliance, if we're not careful, of Labour and the Greens, who somehow make Starmer look like a statesman.
Oh, I can't. The Green Party, wow. I've only just finished some scrambled egg. I think that might return if we're not careful. But also, yeah, we're skint. We're completely deindustrialising at an alarming rate. We have no way of defending ourselves. We're riddled with criminality. We've been absolutely penetrated by foreign gangs who are shipping their people in backs of lorries, dinghies. We're paying for them to stay in hotels still. On top of all of this blimmin' government just breathe a profligate waste on ridiculous, controversial, deeply unpopular schemes such as digital ID cards. If that's not bad enough, when you think of how much the rollout of these unwanted digital ID cards are going to cost, like all governments, like all Whitehall departments, like all petty-fogging ministers in junior positions, they've launched an 8-week consultation, which of course is probably going to cost millions of pounds for a load of do-gooders to sit around and talk about how, apparently, this biometric authentication system needs to be useful, inclusive and trusted. Inclusive. Well, what does that mean? An ID card. An ID card. Like, this is who you are. This is what you are. This is how you are identified. Will not include your biological sex. Well, I mean, what's the point? I might just call myself Derek and, I don't know, pretend I'm some sort of Afro-Caribbean man in his early 20s. It's just, if you're not going to put actual scientifically evidentiable information on this ID card, well, it's purposeless in my view, utterly purposeless.
I think it's a beautiful little synecdoche, a little microcosm of Labour all over. So they come up with an idea that actually polled originally quite popular in the abstract. People liked the idea of ID cards when you ask them about it, because I think the questions would be like, it might stop help illegal immigration or so on. They go out and they announce it. Immediately, the anti-Midas touch, it becomes much less popular. Kemi Badenoch said, well, there are good points and bad points, but it's a gimmick, but we should have a proper conversation, which wasn't a great answer, admittedly. And Farage, to be fair to him, came straight out and said it was a bad idea, and I think he deserves some credit for that, to be honest. And then it got so unpopular that they said, right, this mandatory idea that we want to use to control your lives, because they're socialists and that's what they want to do, it will now not be mandatory, it will only be optional, so it defeats most of the purpose of it. And then again, as you say, now we've discovered that they won't actually collect important bits of your ID, like if you're a man or a woman, because they're worried about the 18 trans people who are still left, who are all probably Labour members, and attacking them about this. And meanwhile, they kicked Rosie Duffield, who was the one Labour MP, I think, who gained a seat in that 2019 rout where they were so roundly defeated, and they kicked her out of the party and taken the whip off of her because she has dared at any point to say, actually, sorry, there are only two sexes, male and female, and now they're so scared of the remaining people that talk about this, Alex, they won't even put it on the ID cards.
But also, it was so, last year. We're done with it now. We don't care anymore. This nonsense is so far out of fashion. It's like that time in the 90s, for some reason, someone invented this weird, combination of a skirt over a pair of trousers sewn together. People wore it for about one season and realised how ridiculous they looked. It's over. It's gone. By the time this stuff gets rolled out, it'll probably be criminal to not record your gender. It's a bit like, this sort of stuff always reminds me of HS2. As soon as you've got a consultation, it's like, right, never going to happen, just going to be a sort of centrifugal drain pipe of taxpayers' money. So a lot of people who frankly shouldn't have jobs because they couldn't do anything else other than, I don't know, conduct surveys and wear lanyards, managed to make gazillions of pounds between them. It sickens me. We're the most clownish country, I think, on planet Earth right now. James, I love you to bits. See you back in the Shire, my darling. The brilliant James Price there, ladies and gentlemen. Well, what do you think about the news today? Someone's messaged me saying, hi Alex, love the just got out of bed look. My hair's become unruly. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I've been down the seaside, but I woke up this morning, I looked in the mirror and I thought I was looking at Marge Simpson. I was like, whoa, what's that? Poor old Ness, she did her best with hairspray and tongs and things like that, but sometimes follicles can't be controlled. Right, what are your thoughts on today's news? 0344499 1000 is the number to dial. It is your normal network rate. You know what I mean? Doesn't really cost you any extra, does it? You could also send a WhatsApp on that number, 0344499 1000, or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number if you'd rather send a text message. If you're going to do that, write the word talk before you text. Again, it's your normal rate, etc. OK, we're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere, because we're going to be talking to some of you and reading out more messages just after this.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Apparently, the German word that James Price was looking for in terms of the chess move, where a player is forced to make a move, but any legal move worsens their position, is Zugzwang. I love it. Zugzwang. I'm going to remember that. I'm going to use it. I feel a bit zugzwanged today. Alex Starmer swanning around like he's an important player in the Middle East conflict is really embarrassing. Oh my gosh, wasn't it? It's like, mate, just don't even get on the plane, son. Like, seriously, just give up. Just hide, go somewhere. I don't know, go for some more speech therapy lessons or whatever it was. What exactly can he contribute to the world order? Other world leaders must look at the chaos on the streets every week in the UK. Our economy, our security, our military, pretty much anything you care to name. And wonder why the hell are you here? And try to fix the mess in broken Britain. Exactly. How dare you bimble off to the Gulf and go like, this is what you should be doing? I mean, mate, look at your own country. 2/3 of people want you gone. Gone. This isn't 2/3 of people don't really like you, don't agree with your latest speech or policy. No, they want you gone. They want an election now so they can get rid of you. That's most of the country. Don't you just parade around telling other people what they should think. It's ridiculous. Joanna in Salisbury says, I'm hoping that Talk has a contingency plan for cable cutting by the Russians. I'll be having withdrawal effects if Talk doesn't broadcast every single day. It keeps me remotely sane. Do you know, to be honest, at this stage, I would imagine if there were sort of weird cables being cut and this, that and the other, we might be one of the last people able to broadcast. You know, we're like a Murdoch empire, aren't we? We're sort of in the big, Talk towers overlooking the vista of London. Maybe it'll come down to us. Maybe we'll be like Charles de Gaulle or something, you know, as the lights go out across Europe and we'll be the one beacon of truth still functioning because, you know, we're private sector. Bye, BBC. Bye-bye. We can dream. OK, let's hit up the phone lines and speak to Andrew in Hertfordshire. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning. 3 points. First and foremost, your hair, it looks fantastic. It would only be a problem if you dyed it mauve and gave yourself a mental health fringe.
Oh, do you know, the mental health fringe sort of came of its own accord earlier this year. I started getting all this, like, extra hair from nowhere. And I looked at it and I thought, blimey, I'm becoming a Corbynista. Hence all the flyaway bits. But there you go. It's not mauve, at least. Yeah,
so 2 points. In relation to Starmer and the negotiations, what? He's working with Pakistan? You know, who sold the Iranians the knowledge for the nuclear bombs?
Yeah.
It was Pakistan.
Pakistan and Germany. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there was a bloke called Imran Khan, great cricketer. Those people he's sitting down with and glad-handing, they've got him in a prison and they're torturing him. And they are as bad as the IRGC. In relation to the digital cards, he had a chance to lead, and so did the Labour government. You were wrong in your assertion earlier. There are only two sexes, male and female. That's what it has to say on there.
Yes, exactly.
So it has to say male, and that's the government leading. So all the normal people could go, I'll get one because it shows that I'm a man, or a female. It's the biggest waste of time because at the end of the day, all people want is anyone that's an illegal migrant or an asylum seeker, they're the same thing. They should have them. Nobody else.
But then the thing is, hold on. If they have them and nobody else, how do you know when to check them?
Because when they come in, we take their blood, their DNA.
Yeah, but say they go into a doctor's surgery. And, you know, they need to show their digital ID or whatever, or in a bank or, you know, whatever circumstance. How does the person behind the desk in the doctor's surgery or the bank know that they should ask them in the first place? Do you see what I mean? This is the point. You can't say only these people have to have them. Unfortunately, with these things, it's kind of almost as if everybody is going to have them. I think it's a signal of the end times. I hate it. I think it's utterly vile because you know what they're going to do, Andrew, because I figured this out a long time ago. They are digitising all of our tax returns, which will be connected to our bank accounts, and that is via the government gateway. Similarly, during COVID, we all suddenly had online NHS accounts, didn't we, to show vaccine certificates, etc., which are connected to our medical records, which in turn will be connected, no doubt, to the government gateway for people who might be in receipt of some sort of universal credit or welfare connected to poor health. Well, that will have to connect to medical records, so that'll be the same for all of us. And in the end, what you're going to have is everything from your council tax to your tax returns to your medical records to your bank account, all living together in a cobweb of doom where essentially the government can know everything about you. It's not really going to be that different to how they run things in China. I'm just waiting for the Labour government to determine we're going to have a social credit system as well, and if you don't put out the right, bins in the right order on the right day with the right stuff in it, you're going to start having, I don't know, your allowances docked or something. I find it utterly dystopian. The only thing between us and the nightmare that will be full throttle digital ID is this government's incompetence. Andrew, thank you ever so much. Great points you made there. OK, we are taking a short break, but when we get back, it is time to have a little look at what may or may not be going on in Iran. Who's leading Iran? Who's calling the shots? Can there ever be some sort of negotiated peace? Is that desirable? Will Israel stop bombing Lebanon? Will Hezbollah stop bombing Israel? Can Pakistan sort things out? I doubt it very much. But somebody who I think has one of the best viewpoints on this war, the special correspondent for the Daily Mail, David Patrikarakis, is going to be joining us after this. He is superb. He's the only one really worth listening. Not the only one, but he's the one the most worth listening to, in my opinion, when it comes to cutting through the noise and getting to the facts. And he's joining us just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there. Don't mind me getting distracted. I was just looking for the Telegraph to find out how to make my own gentleman's relish. Really is a sign of the end times when Peyton Pepperum is going out of production. Love that stuff. Right. OK, talking about love, there isn't much of a love-in anymore between Starmer and Donald Trump. Starmer having the audacity to blame Trump, putting in the same category as Putin. Well, you rabble-rouser, did you really need to go in and mess things up in Iran? We here in Britain don't have a sensible energy policy. You're making things very hard for us, aren't you? But what really is going on in Iran? I was off social media for Lent. I was looking at it to follow the news, to follow certain accounts, so I think have brilliant insights. But what I noticed, and I think, this continues really on from what happened with Gaza. I'm going to call it the footballification of war. Because, there's been a war going on between Ukraine and Russia for a long time now. And what I don't see is a blow-by-blow account of, well, Putin's winning. No, he's not. Zelensky's winning. No, he's not. What's the plan? I mean, when America signed a $60 billion check and gave it to Ukraine, did they say to Europe, do you have an end game in sight by any chance? Do you know how you're going to resolve this? Because you haven't really given them enough weapons, and you took a long time stalling when he first invaded and didn't go about doing anything. He didn't even sanction Russia effectively. So how do you think you're going to resolve this and make this not a war of attrition? No, we don't do that with Russia and Ukraine because it's not connected to identity politics. Yet when it comes to anything now with the Middle East and anything to do with Donald Trump, it's always, well, Donald Trump must be doing something awful. We've all got to prove that he's failing in his aims. What are your aims? Oh, look, you haven't achieved any of them. And also when it comes to anything now to do with the Middle East, we somehow need to take the side of terrorists as well. We've seen this after Gaza, where we had some sort of really perverse running commentary of every single day. How many people are dead? How many bombs have been dropped? And so in the noise and the confusion of what seems to me one side trying to outsmart and get one over on the other side online surrounding what's going on in Iran, it's really hard to find a voice that just looks at the nitty-gritty detail, takes an angle that is completely objective and gives you the facts. Don't worry, we have him. He joins us now. It's David Patrikarakos, special correspondent for the Daily Mail. First of all, let's talk about what may or may not be going on in Iran as the Supreme Leader demands blood money and the idea that Tehran are going to wager a levy on the Strait of Hormuz. They essentially already were doing this by saying, well, we're not going to launch missiles at various vessels connected to friendly nations because they need to sell their oil. But is this sustainable for them?
Well, Alex, I think that's a very good question. My belief is no. Look, the Strait of Hormuz is one of Iran's only points of leverage. It's also its most vital artery. Iran needs to sell its oil. All its other industries are basically degraded through its own incompetence and through sanctions. So I think that this is not sustainable over the medium term even. Also as well, when we talk about tolls, things like that, don't forget the strait also passes through Oman. And I think they'd have a very, very hard time enforcing this. I think this is rhetoric. Let's see, but it's the only point of leverage they have, and fair play to them. They're milking it for all it's worth.
We're now sort of learning that there could be some sort of talks, although no one can agree on the talks themselves, let alone have the talks. Which makes me think, actually, no one really knows who's in charge of Iran anymore. I mean, no one even knows if the Supreme Leader is capable of issuing a statement, surely.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, when you reported, the Supreme Leader's asked for blood money, it's like, well, has he? We don't know. I mean, look, when it comes to Mojtaba Khamenei, the regime cannot do the one simple thing to prove that he's alive. Just a video or even an audio. The fact that they cannot do that, I think, indicates that he's probably not in tip-top shape. The point you make is correct again. Look, by degrading Iran's leadership to the degree that it has, command and control is completely confused. Look, I speak to security sources who are, Iran is so penetrated, and they talk about orders coming in from above that the Iranians don't understand why they're being made. They're all paranoid. They're worried that maybe some of their leaders are Mossad agents. It's completely confused. We have this 10-point peace plan basis that was floating around that people on social media appear to believe was the final agreement. People think that there is a treaty here in this ceasefire, that something has been signed, no, it hasn't. There's the beginning of something that we want. Both sides wanted a ceasefire. Like the Iranians want this ceasefire as well. They need respite. And I would urge you, Alex, and you do know, but all of your viewers and listeners to understand one thing here, okay? What you have is on the Iranian side a complete comm siege. They cut all of the internet. We don't know what's happening in Iran, really, and we don't know what the Iranian people are saying. Set against that, the Iranians are looking at every single person online criticizing Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, and this has emboldened them, and it is enabling some of their best propaganda.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I sort of maintained for a long time. The West are essentially getting in the way of the West. It seems to me that Iran has been pretty much crippled when it comes to their naval capabilities. It seems to me that they haven't got surface-to-air missiles anymore, so America can, by and large, apart from a few unfortunate incidents, fly aircraft over their territory and carry out attacks. It seems to me nobody is in charge anymore. They don't look to me like they're in a good state whatsoever, let alone declaring victory. And yet you've got all of these people going, well, you know, it seems to me Iran's won at the end of the day. And I'm like, really? How'd you draw that conclusion? And yet, you know, from my perspective, you're sort of sitting there looking at the situation in Iran thinking, well, finish the job, why don't you? Why do you think, is it just the fact that there was the ricochet of gas prices and oil prices around the world going up, that it was having an economic impact? Was it the fact that there were so many naysayers amongst NATO allies about ongoing offensive action in Iran that has made Donald Trump step away from the brink? Is he likely to turn around and go, do you know what? This ceasefire ain't worth the paper it's probably not even written on. Let's get back to business.
Look, I think it's a lot of things. I think fundamentally there was an issue in the beginning that Donald Trump said this was about regime change. And then he handed the Iranians a gift. Every day that they survived, they could say we're winning. And then the global discourse moved towards them. Look, I don't think you can do regime change solely from the air, not least because there is no organized opposition with critically a leader to replace the Ayatollahs. Any regime change will only come from within the regime. There'll just be a transfer of power within it. So I think he set an unrealistic goal. If he had said, in Trumpian language, I'm going to degrade the Iranians like you've never seen. We're going to take them all out from the air. It's going to be surgical. The intelligence is going to be out of this world. He would have been proved right, but he didn't. So this is where we are. And look, I call it the despot dividend, okay? When despots, dictatorships fight democracies, they always have an advantage. First of all, that they're not subject to short-term electoral cycles, right? Putin, if he's not killed, can plan for 10, 15, 20 years ahead. The other, and we should be grateful for this, is that we have a free media in the West. So the Iranians have closed everything down. If let's say Iranians were on social media, what do you think they'd be saying about their regime, about their success, heavy air quotes, in this war? They'd be all over them. They'd be criticizing, but we don't hear from them. So you have a disequilibrium. On the one hand, Iranian leaders crowing. On the other, everybody criticizing. And that's what we have to accept, because we don't want the alternative of a closed media here. Look, in the end, you said at the beginning, all of this stuff is ideological, it's identity politics. I am not saying that the Iranian regime is going to collapse. I'm not saying that the war is yet won. What I'm saying is we do not know until the shooting stops. Let's see if the Iranian people come out onto the streets in a week's, month's time. Let's see if this regime can still govern and oppress its people. We've taken out, or the Americans have taken out all the banks. They can't pay their people. So let's see how that they survive. I'm not saying they're going to collapse. What I'm saying is everybody going, well, it's over, we lost, there's going to be no regime. We just don't know. It is not intellectually respectable to say anything other than that.
And when we're talking, you know, people are sort of assessing and analysing what's gone on in Iran as if, you know, it's been a war of attrition for 3 years. It's been 4 weeks, for crying out loud. It's pretty early days by anybody's standards when it comes to achieving any sort of end goal, whatever they may be. Is there a risk here now that the relationship between Israel and America is straining? Because Netanyahu clearly wants to fulfil his promise to his people, I would say understandably so, of completely getting rid of, or at least degrading to an extent that they can no longer lob missiles over the border, the proxies of Iran, and is busy, you know, bombing Beirut, when some people are saying, well, Lebanon was part of this ceasefire agreement and that seems to have not reached Israel. Is there a risk that those two are now dividing? Because at the end of the day, what is in Israel's interest no longer is necessarily in America's interests.
Look, I mean, it's possible, right? There was always a divergence of between Israel and America, but simply put, the existential threat Iran and its proxies pose to Israel is greater than that of the US, than it is to the US. Look, in the aftermath of October the 7th, I went to northern Israel, where Hezbollah were just relentlessly bombing, and, you know, entire villages had been cleared out. Look, imagine if the north of England was being bombed relentlessly and you had to clear out Leeds or Manchester. You know, people there would be saying to the government, rightly so, this is not sustainable, it's not acceptable, you have to stop it. So Israel is trying to clear out that buffer zone. And it comes back to an earlier point as well that we were talking about. The Iranians say Lebanon was part of the ceasefire. Israel say it isn't, because there is no really written, agreed upon ceasefire. Everyone's kind of stopping for the moment, getting a respite and, you know, continuing where they can, I think. Look, Iran is still bombing the Gulf. So nobody really knows. Everything is confused. We have Pakistan as a negotiator, which really is an arsonist in a fire station or whatever analogy you want to use. Everything is confused. This is not finished yet, one way or another.
And I think you're very right about that. And I hope that you come back and keep us very well informed, because I can't sing your praises high enough. You're the only voice, really, that I go to first to look for what's going on, because you cut through all the noise and the nonsense and tell us like it is. The brilliant David Patrikarakos, special correspondent for the Daily Mail. OK, we're going to be taking a little breather. Put the kettle on, go get yourself a nice cup of coffee. Don't use oat milk, that's for weirdos, isn't it? And we'll see you just after this.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right. Now, you may remember that earlier this week, a Waitrose security guard ended up losing his job by trying to stop a shoplifter. Well, off the back of that, Talk conducted an undercover investigation into Britain's growing shoplifting epidemic and put 5 major supermarkets' security practices to the test.
Over the past 24 hours, I conducted a shoplifting experiment. I went into Tesco, Aldi, Sainsbury's, Marks & Spencer and Waitrose. Now, I conducted this experiment in light of the security guard from Waitrose who was sacked after stopping a shoplifter. I took items off the shelf, I put them into my rucksack, I put my rucksack on my back and I walked straight out the front door. I just want to add that we never planned to permanently steal anything, and we did actually leave a letter inside the shop, which was placed very obviously, and recorded ourselves putting it there with a £10 note inside, explaining what we were doing, just in case things got a little bit heated.
So in front of me is Waitrose, and I'm about to head in there and see what happens.
So that was Waitrose, first supermarket. I literally openly put the stuff in my bag: barbecue sauce, rice, soy sauce and a tin of kidney beans. I put it into my bag, I nervously walked to the front door, I walked straight out the front door and away we go. So mate, just let you know, I am recording.
Yeah.
I've just done a social experiment, so I'm not nicking this stuff, but I've put it in my bag. I'm going to put it back. I've left 10 quid on the shelf over there just in case I got caught, but I didn't get caught.
Yeah.
So yeah,
okay.
I'm just going to put it back, yeah?
Yeah.
Cheers, mate. Barbecue sauce. All right, just let you know, I've got nothing in my bag. I did walk out of the shop with stuff in my bag. It's part of an experiment that I was doing.
Oh, really?
So yeah, but I just thought I'd be honest with you and let you know. Take care. Cheers. Okay, here we go. Sainsbury's, shoplift number 2. Got to try and be a bit more obvious this time. I've got my tenner that I'm going to leave in the shop. Sainsbury's, done. I took some fruit juice, milk and pigs in blankets and I slid underneath the barrier thinking that might sort of attract a bit of attention. I walked out the front door, I waited, and sure enough, nothing happened. Shoplift number 2 done. Time to put everything back and away we go. Here goes, backpack on, ready to go into Tesco. Tesco, third time lucky. I took some cereal bars, I took a few other bits and bobs from that same aisle, and I walked straight out the front door, straight through the barrier, past the security guard, and I wasn't stopped again. I did, however, go back in to speak to this security guard. Hi mate, I'm just letting you know, I'm just basically doing a social experiment. So I've just nicked a load of stuff. I'm going to go and put it back now, yeah?
Why did you do that?
Just a social experiment, mate. You know, in light of what's happened, I've left some money in the shop on the shelf. So I'm just going to go and put the stuff back now, yeah? Yeah?
I don't know what kind of social experience is it?
Well, it's in light of what's happened at Waitrose, you know, the guy being sacked for stopping the guy nicking stuff. So the guy's been sacked. So basically I've just taken that stuff under the value of a tenner. I've left a tenner in the shop in an envelope, and now I'm just going to go and put it back.
Where's the tenner?
I'll show you. So I'll put the envelope there with the money in, yeah?
All right.
And now I'll put the stuff back.
All right.
Yeah? Okay, cheers mate. He just said it's almost impossible to stop. He said even when we do catch them, we can't call the police because the police don't do anything. It's absolutely pointless. The police don't even turn up. Marks and Spencer, fourth time lucky. And yeah, I wasn't stopped again. I went down a few aisles. I took some chocolate biscuits. I put them in my bag. I walked through the tills and straight out the front door, and nobody stopped me. When I did go and tell the security guard what I'd done, he was very concerned, and he did actually take a picture of the letter that I'd left in, but he was very understanding about what I was doing, because I did take time, as I did with the other 3, to explain what I was doing and why I was doing it. Hi mate, it's a social experiment in light of what happened in Waitrose. So I'm just letting you know, I have left a tenner in the shop. Okay. I'm just going to go and put the stuff back that I've just nicked.
Okay.
Yeah, nice one. I'll put it all back, mate, yeah?
Did you nick the food?
Yeah, so I nicked it all. I nicked some food then and walked out of the shop.
When?
And nobody stopped me.
When?
Just now. You can open it if you want. I left that in the shop. So there's a letter to say what I'm doing and £10 notes to cover what I nicked, but now I'll put the stuff back.
I was on my route here. So if we know someone is stealing, yeah? First of all, we have to confirm.
Confirm.
Someone is proper shoplifter,
Yeah.
So when he went out here, stopped at the door.
Aldi, here goes. Aldi, well, same again. I walked in, I took some squash, some fruit, 3 bottles of fruit juice, right by the tills. I walked through the tills, out the front door, and I wasn't stopped again. I did walk back in, and the shop staff didn't seem too happy
with me in this situation, despite me trying to explain what I was doing and why I was doing it.
Lucy Wing, Crime Policy Advisor at the British Retail Consortium, said, confronting a shoplifter is a major trigger for violence against store workers. Colleagues are trained on how to de-escalate the situation without putting themselves in harm's way. Retailers welcome the imminent passage of the Crime and Policing Bill, which will strengthen action against offenders, including making assaulting a retail worker a standalone offence and removing the £200 threshold for investigating theft. It is vital the police respond to every reported incident to visibly demonstrate to offenders that all types of retail crime will not be tolerated.
Aldi and Sainsbury's said they were aligned to the British Retail Consortium's statement.
A Waitrose spokesperson said, there is a serious danger to life in tackling shoplifters. We refuse to put anyone's life at risk, and that's why we have policies in place that are very clearly understood and must be strictly followed. As a responsible employer, we never want to be in a position where we're notifying families of a tragedy because someone tried to stop a theft. Nothing we sell is worth risking lives for.
A Marks & Spencer spokesperson said the safety of our colleagues must always come first. All our security colleagues receive extensive training when it comes to dealing with retail crime, and the focus is very much on deterring crime rather than detaining. We would never want a colleague to put themselves at risk. At M&S, we invest tens of millions of pounds each year to protect our colleagues and our stores.
Tesco did not respond to a request for comment.
Well, staggering, but not surprising, I think we would all agree. Let's speak now to former Commander of Specialist Operations at New Scotland Yard, Roy Ram. I mean, it's just deeply disturbing, really, isn't it? How commonplace, how easy it could be for somebody who wanted to shoplift, that it is, in fact, for criminals who are doing this up and down the country. And what can be done about this? Where has this come from? Why? I mean, there's always been shoplifting. There's always been theft. It's not like that was invented yesterday. But it's become so brazen. It is repeatedly unpunished. When did the rot set in? What do we need to do to tackle this?
Well, the first thing we need to do is to get police numbers to somewhere which is near where they should be. You know, our population's grown across the UK by just over 8 million since 2010, but we've got 5,000 fewer police officers. So their ability to respond is much less. We need to tackle the number of police officers as a matter of urgency. That's the first thing we need to do. We need also for everyone to stop thinking about this sort of crime, this sort of branding it as shoplifting and not treating it as a crime with real consequences. I think James cleverly made a point yesterday in saying, you know, this is a whole society issue, and it is. And we have to make sure that people understand that getting a criminal conviction, being arrested, it is a disgrace. And I think somewhere along the line, we've lost that. And there are too many, particularly young people, who see, you know, getting engaged with police or doing some shoplifting as not important. We need to make them understand that it can have consequences for the rest of their lives, their ability to get employment, the way they are regarded in society, and that's not happening at the moment. And I, you know, what we saw in Clapham a week or so back, where you know, this kind of gratuitous violence and a whole mob stealing from shops. That needs to have a consequence. And that consequence, first off, needs to be getting a lot of police officers there quickly and arresting not just one or two, but a whole crowd of them and getting them before courts quickly. You know, I once worked at Marylebone Police Station, which policed Oxford Street, and there was quite a bit of professional shoplifting in places like Selfridges and the like. They were detained by store detectives in the stores. They were brought, but the police then attended to stores, collected them up, brought them to the police station, and they were in Marylebone Magistrates Court the next day. And where they were foreign shoplifters, they were sent out of the country very quickly. Where they were domestic shopkeepers, they faced immediate justice. And I think we've lost that. We've lost the connection between actions and consequences.
We have indeed, and I think it's just becoming, it's so brazen now that I think even ordinary people who aren't, normally given to committing such crimes are just getting involved. It's very alarming. Roy, thank you ever so much. And you do look at the situation. I mean, everything from top to bottom. Deportations need to be sorted out. Our courts need to be sorted out. We need more police. We need more social stigma. We need to stop letting people in from countries where they just perpetrate shoplifting as part of industrialised, organised crime. And then the supermarkets, well, do you know what? Perhaps you should help your security guards a little bit more and not sack people for trying to stop shoplifters. Right, taking a short break, back just after this.
Over the past 36 hours, the United States and its partners have launched Operation Epic Fury, one of the largest, most complex, most overwhelming military offensives the world has ever seen. Nobody's seen anything like it. We have hit hundreds of targets in Iran, including Revolutionary Guard facilities, Iranian air defense systems. Just now, it was announced that we knocked out 9 ships plus their naval building, all in a matter of literally minutes. Iran's formerly supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead.
I spoke to you about the situation in the Gulf and explained that the United Kingdom was not involved in the strikes on Iran. That remains the case. The basis of our decision is the collective self-defense of long-standing friends and allies and protecting British lives. That is in accordance with international law, and we are publishing a summary of our legal advice. We are not joining these strikes, but we will continue with our defensive actions in the region.
Mr Farage, would a reform government have allowed US forces to use UK air bases for offensive operations in Iran?
Yes is the answer to your question. I would have said to the Americans, please do use our bases. We will be supportive of you on this.
There were a series of very loud blasts in the area of Dubai that I'm based in. That's in the marina area. It's a very touristy area, actually. Those blasts were the loudest we've heard yet, but equally we are reassured that they are most likely the sound of interception by the UAE's quite sophisticated THAAD interception kit. That is the Terminal High Altitude Area Defence System.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the show. 1 hour done, eh? So much more to talk about. Lots of brilliant messages coming in. Actually, someone sent a message showing what appears to be a Twitter post from Pakistan Defence Minister. I've just gone online on X to look at this account. It appears to be a Pakistani politician for certain who's talking at Khawaja M as if here he is. He's talking about Zionism as a threat to humanity. I mean, look, it's the usual sort of stuff. A worker of Pakistan Muslim League. I don't know if he's the defence minister or not. I'm not brilliant on who's in the current Pakistani government. But, yeah, I mean, look, yes, we know that Pakistan is saying they're going to broker the peace deal, and we know as well whose side they're likely to be on. I did actually do a certain amount of work in Pakistan for a while, and I can tell you this for free, they ain't fans of Israel, like much of the Muslim world. But, you know, that's how the cookie crumbles, isn't it? It's why it's so astonishing, actually, and I keep pointing to this, in the maelstrom of opinions and one-upmanships and gotcha interviews, everyone's missing one of the main miracles that's taken place in 2025, 2026, that began in Donald Trump's first term as American president, and that was the Abraham Accords. Seriously, when you look at the entrenched attitudes towards Israel, towards Jewish people by many Muslim countries, it is astonishing, frankly, that we now have a situation where the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the UAE, Oman, Jordan, Qatar, sort of, on the side of Israel and America against their regional neighbour. They've had long-term hostilities, proxy wars between Shias and Sunnis, and Iran's a big country. It's always wanted to be the biggest, the most powerful in the Middle East. But a lot of these other countries are just fed up with extremism. They see it's a route to poverty, to being ostracised, to staying stuck in some sort of medieval death cult. And they said, no, we want glittering tower blocks. We want to attract foreign visitors. We want tourists. We want expats. We want you to come and help us build a brave new world. And as a result, and that I think is their primary motivation, I don't think they've all woken up and suddenly gone, hey, we've been wrong this whole time about the establishment of Israel. But actually, the fact that they've been signing treaties, the fact that not only that, they're now in a position where they're allowing their airspace, their US air bases, they're using their own missiles. They're even publicly, especially the UAE, coming out in support of America and saying to the likes of Sir Keir Starmer, mate, you're on the wrong side of history. I think it cannot be played up enough how miraculous that is. If you were to take a snapshot of that region 15 years ago, the story would be entirely different. And there are many motivations that have encouraged this change of heart. But perhaps the person who has pushed this along further than anyone could ever have hoped or dreamed was Donald Trump. I mean, whether you hate him, whether you love him, whether you think he's got a screw loose or maybe not a single screw firmly fixed, it's still rather incredible what is taking place in that region. And make no mistake, Iran's not won anything. We're going to be picking up on what is going on in the Middle East a bit later. Meanwhile, apparently Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has said NATO is in America's interest and the UK government will always be strong supporters of the military alliance. Well, this, of course, follows the fact that Donald Trump had a meeting with Mark Rutte, the only one in NATO who seems to still blow smoke up the proverbial, and raised his concerns that when it came to trying to take out a despotic death cult, theocratic, autocratic, tyrannical regime who wanted to threaten the entire world with intercontinental ballistic missiles and a nuclear weapon. And this ain't like Russia having a nuclear weapon. These people are grey. That, you know, he got in, started the job, and even in the simple parts where they wanted initially to use their own air bases, Sir Keir Starmer stood in their way. Even in the other, surely simple thing to evaluate, is this in everybody's interest, i.e. reopening the Strait of Hormuz? Where is NATO? I mean, I understand where he's coming from, because it was only a few years ago that they were moaning and bleating and complaining and begging and heaving and sighing and rolling their eyes because America wasn't handing over vast sums of money to Ukraine. And America was like, most people in America can't even point to Ukraine on a map. That's your backyard. Why can't you deal with the problem? Because did we? Could we? No. It took 6 months for the Germans even to decide to impose sanctions. It took 6 months, pretty much, for the Germans to agree to send anything to Ukraine as big weapons manufacturers who sell their stuff onto other people, other than a couple of hard hats. They even stopped other countries in Eastern Europe who were desperate to help Ukraine, knowing the risk to their own frontiers from using German-procured weapons. The EU did nothing. It bimbled, it bluffed, it prevaricated because it had all been dependent on Russian gas. It thought that it could get Putin around a big negotiating table, sink and bayar, and it would all be good. It made the same mistake with Iran. You cannot negotiate with despots and terrorists. They look at your do-gooder attitudes and they just think, ha, great, let's take advantage of this. And every single time there's a crisis, NATO turns to America and says, well, you're so much bigger than all of us put together. You've got to do something. And then when America says, OK, I'm going to try sort out this Iran thing, then it says to NATO, can you help? They don't just not help. They actively stand in the way. So I'm sorry, Sir Keir Starmer. Your lily-livered platitudes of NATO is in America's interest and the UK government will always be strong supporters. Support in what? In this, that? In chit-chat? Because you can't do anything. We've got no navy to speak of anymore, have we? We can't even stand on our own 2 feet when it comes to energy self-sufficiency. You're not doing anything about that. We were told at the Munich Security Conference twice in a row, once by JD Vance, then by Marco Rubio, drill, baby, drill, put more into defence, get real. We didn't listen. I'm afraid, Sir Keir Starmer, I don't think that's going to do anything to heal relationships with Donald Trump, particularly in another interview. You seem not to be able to keep track of your who you're saying what to at the moment, do you? You were saying you're fed up with Trump, basically comparing him to Putin, because it's a bit of an inconvenience, isn't it, that this is affecting world oil and gas. It just so turns out that regimes who aren't all kumbaya and cuddly, despotic authoritarian regimes love getting their hands on fossil fuel because they know they can blackmail the rest of the world with it. It is the same argument. Why should we have a nuclear deterrent? Because if we don't have one, other people can ride roughshod over us. I'm afraid the same is true for fossil fuels. If you're not going to get your own fossil fuels out, if you're not going to be energy self-sufficient, if you're not going to be pragmatic, get real, industrialise, make your own weapons, be able to keep the lights on, for crying out loud, and you have to keep going, cap in hand, to these countries who don't care about climate change. They barely care about democracy. They don't care about how the UK's economy is going to be affected if they decide to go into war with someone else. In fact, they use it as a blackmail. They use it as a bargaining chip. And it is the utmost lunacy, the utmost display of self-indulgent naivety to still not be drilling in the North Sea. Let's speak now to Paul Embry, trade unionist and author of Despised: Why the Modern Left Loathes the Working Class. I mean, what do you make of Sir Keir Starmer saying we should not be at the mercy of events abroad? This, for a long time, has been used as the reason why we all need to go and change to green energy, except that's been putting us at the mercy of China. We've been having to write massive cheques to Beijing because we're deindustrialising in the process. Even the Tony Blair Institute has turned around and said, get real. And yet, where is Red Ed? Have they locked him in an oubliette?
Morning, Alex. Well, on that final point, I agree. I think the way in which successive governments have sacrificed our nation's energy independence and resilience is nothing short of criminal. You know, we phased out coal too quickly. Most of our oil and gas comes from abroad. We have dragged our heels on nuclear and fracking and carbon capture. And for a country with the status of Britain not to have energy security, I think is atrocious. But on the wider point about what's happening in the Middle East and the debates around NATO and the intervention in Iran and so on, look, I'm no supporter of the theocrats in Tehran. I'm currently reading Sir Salman Rushdie's autobiography, and that's only strengthened my view that this is an appalling regime with appalling people. But I have to say, I think the military intervention is an act of folly on behalf of Trump and Netanyahu. There was a deal in place, that's the reality, agreed by Iran and the world powers in 2015, which I think was largely working. I think most people, apart from Trump, accept that it was largely working, but he decided to rip it up in 2018. And the problem is, Alex, you know, we can take the high-minded approach and say, these people are despots and we need to get rid of them. But we've taken similar approaches throughout the ages, you know, in places like Iraq and Afghanistan and going back to Vietnam and places like this. And quite often it's not as easy as we think it is to bomb countries into liberation and democracy. Quite often these escapades become wars of attrition. And the truth is we're in a situation now where this particular escapade was launched, I have to say, without any indication that there was a serious plan for what might happen if Iran decided to...
If I could interject, Paul, because the other day I interviewed the very man who was the person monitoring the development of Iranian nuclear weapons. He was looking at uranium enrichment. In fact, the UN itself knows that uranium has been enriched to near weapons grade. It has said so. And he said, yes, Iran was on the cusp of being able to develop a nuclear warhead, at the very least a dirty bomb, which they could do right now, probably. And yes, they do have intercontinental ballistic missiles. That has been proven. And yes, it would have been a point of no return if Iran had been able to develop a nuclear warhead that it could fire not just at Israel, but at the West, because all of a sudden, the madness of the regime that you don't like the rest of us, would have the biggest form of blackmail, the most threatening, vile, nihilistic weapon that's ever been created. And you know what? Unlike, as crazy as you might think Putin is, unlike Russia, the way that their minds work, they don't care about death. Death to them means nothing. And, you know, with that information, do you not think that there was a real urgency to, at the very least, do what they have done, which is degrade their capabilities?
Well, I don't actually think that is the consensus view. I think broadly, I think most people recognise that the deal was working. But the problem is, Alex, even if you accept that, you know, there was something going on in terms of Iran trying to develop weapons, where are we left now? We still have the same regime in place. The regime hasn't gone. Yes, a few people at the top have been killed and new people have come in, but I think many experts are saying that actually in many cases the new people who have come in are even more hardline than the old people. There's nothing in terms of the nuclear enrichment that we've got eyes on now, because we don't have boots on the ground. We don't have inspectors in the country. There's no guarantee actually that they don't have the facility and that all of that ability has been depleted. We're facing an economic catastrophe across the wider world as a result of what's going on in terms of the blockage of the Strait of Hormuz and so on. And what we've done more than anything is now given the hardline leaders in Iran even more of an incentive to say, actually, we do need these weapons, because if we are going to be constantly under threat from America and Israel, during negotiations, by the way, this attack was launched, as you know, even when Jonathan Powell, the national security advisor in the UK, who was part of, you know, those negotiations, said, actually, those negotiations were going well and could have reached a new settlement. So now, from Iran's point of view, they're thinking, well, every time we negotiate, we're attacked. There's no good faith on the part of America and Israel. What more incentive do we need to get nuclear weapons than what's happened to us over the last few weeks? And that's the reality of where we...
On this one, I'm diametrically opposed to you on pretty much everything. I fundamentally believe Iran was able to develop a nuclear weapon. I've spoken to, like I said, the world's leading experts on this. The UN knows that uranium was enriched. And yes, the deal was working for Iran, because Germany and Pakistan were able to sell them the technology for them to develop weapons of that kind, because you can't negotiate with a terrorist. But look, you know, all opinions are allowed on this. But when it comes to opinions about Sir Keir Starmer, 2/3 of voters, it's not just a case that people aren't particularly happy with him, that, you know, most prime ministers have this sort of midterm slump. It's almost 2 years into his leadership. 2/3 want him gone. That's really not very good, is it?
No, and I think there's a general sense around the country that we are in quite a sharp decline. I mean, the reality is that the economy has busted, and has been busted for a long time. That's not just Sir Keir Starmer's doing. I mean, that's been the situation since 2008. Public services are creaking. I think there is a sense that there is some very real social disintegration going on in many of our communities. I think there's a large group of of people, particularly the traditional working class in this country, who feel that they're losing their status in society. I think there's a sense that we are kind of fragmenting, we're kind of retreating to our own tribes, and a lot of the cohesion is breaking down. We're seeing the rise of communal sectarianism and so on. And I think that's why we're witnessing this sort of major political realignment taking place, where the two big establishment parties, Labour and the Tories, are now kind of hold beneath the waterline in the polls, and neither seems to be able to get 20% in terms of popular support in the polls. And you're seeing more radical parties, the Greens on the left, Reform on the right, coming through. And I think the thing is, Alex, once upon a time you used to hear the phrase, you know, I vote Labour or I vote Tory because that's what my parents did, that's what my grandparents did. Those tribal loyalties are breaking down. So we are in for, I think, a really interesting time over the next couple of years, and we probably need to buckle in.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a pattern that's been repeated across Europe before us, quite frankly. And I wouldn't necessarily, the Green Party I definitely consider radical. I wouldn't necessarily consider Reform, which came out of the party I once represented, the Brexit Party, as particularly radical, more just like the Conservatives of, I don't know, the 1990s or something. But no, definitely huge changes happening in politics. And do you think there will be huge changes happening after May's elections? Because, you know, it doesn't look good for Starmer. The general public want him gone. There are various people in the Labour Party on manoeuvres. I can't imagine that the May elections are going to be a walk in the park. You know, if he wakes up following the local elections, following the Senedd elections and the Holyrood elections, and finds essentially he's lost almost every last seat down to the man, do you think he'll walk?
I don't think he's necessarily the type of guy who does walk away, even when he's beleaguered, as he is at the moment. And I think the difficulty for the Labour Party really is there doesn't really seem to be an obvious standout successor. And, you know, I tweeted recently, when you look at this is how politics has changed, not just in the Labour Party, but across the spectrum. When you look at the Labour leadership election of 1976, there were half a dozen real big hitters, the likes of Tony Benn and Michael Foot and Jim Callaghan and Roy Jenkins and Tony Crossland and Dennis Healey. Any one of them could have led the Labour Party in the country because they had gravitas and they had intelligence and so on. And I think it's a sign of the times, really, that we look now, as I say, not just at the Labour Party, but across the spectrum. And nobody, or very few people, have anything like that sort of gravitas and that sort of status. And that doesn't bode well. So will Starmer go? Probably not. Will there be a challenge? I think it's probably likely, because Labour, I think, are going to be hammered at the elections in May.
Who do you think is the most likely person or people to level that challenge against Starmer?
I think Wes Streeting is probably on manoeuvres. He certainly seems to have been over recent months. I mean, I have to say my favourite candidate would be Shabana Mahmood. I think that she's probably one of the few people on the Labour benches in Parliament who truly understands what the party needs to do to reconnect with the millions of lost working class voters who once supported it and no longer do. She's been ostracised by many MPs because of the tougher stance that she's taken on immigration, but for me, she's more in touch with the country than most of them.
Paul, it's always lovely having you on. Thank you ever so much for joining us today. Paul Embry, ladies and gentlemen. Right, what are your thoughts on the things we've been talking about? Lots of people messaging in about Iran. Most of you, frankly, siding with me on that. Not thinking it was worth the risk of going, well, you know, they didn't seem to be doing anything with the JCPOA. Hey, they weren't letting the nuclear inspectors in. You know, they were making nuclear weapons. We know they were. I mean, is it worth taking the chance of, well, you know, they probably won't use it. Well, they probably can't make it I mean, do you understand? Do you understand what would have happened if they had been able to make a nuclear weapon? I go to bed every night thankful for Donald Trump. I really do. I remember that bullet heading towards his face in the last minute as he flicked his head away and it scraped his ear. And sometimes I wonder if it really was divine intervention, because if it were not for Donald Trump, and let's face it, Iran could well have been the people behind that assassination attempt. Were it not for him and the bunker buster bombs, we'd be living in a world that doesn't even bear thinking about. Going to take a short break now. I want to hear your thoughts on everything we're talking about. 0344 499 1000. That's the number to dial. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message. Leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number if you want to send a text message. It's all your normal cost. Oh yeah, if you're doing a text, write talk before you write the body of your message. Ping it across. Can't wait to read some out. Back after this.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning and unfortunately conflict. This is Talk War and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Oh, hello, having a good old cough there. I think I managed to evade doing that on air. Let's rattle through some messages and then let's take some calls, shall we? Rob from Burnley. Would we agree that renewables are a relatively new technology? Well, relative to drilling for oil, some might say. We're in the early days of green tech, so why would any responsible person, let alone a government minister, hand over huge amounts of their money or country's budgets to one supplier, China, for technology that's in its early phase and will likely be obsolete in the next decade? It's not just that, but, you know, there isn't really much difference when you come to think about it, OK? We're obsessed with this idea that, well, you know, if we're not getting fossil fuels, then that's great. We're no longer at the mercy of Vladimir Putin and the Ayatollah, etc. And yet, why do people not put solar panels and windmills in that same category? Because we're now at the mercy of China, whether or not they sell them to us, whether or not we can afford them, whether or not they might have kill switches in, whether or not they've got the capabilities, the factories, the power stations and the materials to build these things, because we don't. Because we're buying them from China, because we're not enriching our own economy, because we're not creating a downflow of jobs, because we're not using our own fossil fuels, which are free. We don't have to pay people for those. They're in our sovereign territory. We can access them and use that to generate the power, to build the factories. If you really want to go tonto on green energy, fine, OK, but have it made in the United Kingdom. Oh, you can't, can you? Because that would mean building factories that need power that would actually then break your net zero commitments. It's just mad. It's mad. And so why we think that, you know, being at the mercy of China is somewhat better. Guess what? Even if we wanted to buy wigwams and glass plates or whatever from them, they can't even get through the Strait of Hormuz now, can they? Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear. Ed, mate, give up, son. The game's over. The net zero thing is done, is gone, is finished. It was a numbskull move by the Conservative Party. It's even a more mental move by you and your weird GB energy, whatever it is, taking over the national grid. It's over, son. Come on, come out the oubliette. Admit defeat. You got it wrong. Your religion doesn't exist. It's balmy. It's a load of funny people with short fringes waving placards. It doesn't work. Give up, son. Give up. Right. Let's do some calls. Let's speak to Nigel in London. Good morning, Nigel.
Well, good morning, Alex. You are firing on all 16 cylinders. I'm delighted at your rapport, your strength in pushing forward common sense. Just before I talk about shoplifting, where we live in the United States, just to make everybody envious and just to show how useless this country is, our electricity costs are only 75% cheaper than here.
No, no. Tell me what your monthly bill looks like.
Well, it depends because we have the AC on because of the heat, but it's just per kilowatt hour. It's cents compared to, well, it's just very, very cheap. It's 75% cheaper than my current cost in the United Kingdom. That's how cheap it is. It's mad. But shoplifting, I want to talk about this because, of course, there's people are missing the point about shoplifting. There's no such an offence as shoplifting. It's theft.
Yeah.
And people say, oh, it's shoplifting, it's glamorous. No, it's not. It's theft. And I'm disappointed in retailers as much as the police for not addressing this problem and failing to hold police to account by knocking on the door of chief constables and the commissioner and saying, what are you doing to protect our goods and services? What are you doing to protect our staff? What are you doing to protect our profits from thugs coming in and stealing goods? The police are absolutely useless, and I'm also sorry to say that as a result of shoplifting, your groceries, my groceries, are increased. And why do shop owners like Waitrose and Marks and Spencers have security staff if they're not allowed to do anything?
I mean, look, I totally agree. It does push up the price of produce because they have to factor in. It's the same thing when they got rid of cashiers and people were sort of trusted to scan their own items. They were like, well, the amount we save on wages will be the amount that it will probably cost us for people nicking stuff. But hey-ho, it still works out better off for us. The profits are still better. But what's the situation like in America? Because I remember seeing on social media, and it still exists now in some of the big cities, crazy shoplifting, looting. I mean, I remember during BLM there were hordes of feral youths just sort of ransacking grocery stores, you know, running out with backpacks full of trainers, whatever, as if it's some sort of, you know, reparations against, you know, discrimination or some such. Well, and you when you see terrible things happening in America, you can almost set your watch and wait for it to start happening in the United Kingdom.
Well, the difference is in America, you've got federal law and state law. That's one thing. In this country, you've got just one law for the United Kingdom. But what is interesting is in America, of course, you're going to get marauding, using gangs going to go into some stores, and you're never going to stop that. But if a shopkeeper or a shop owner or you as a citizen of America dials 911, guess what happens? The police turn up. Right. Because they have to turn up. And they deal with it, and they robustly deal with it. And they're not going to roll on the ground with some bloke who just nicked, 6 bottles of wine, 6 steaks and a pack of the cornflakes. They're going to bust him and arrest him and send him to jail.
I assume you're probably in a sane part of America. I think maybe was it New York, California, one of those actually decriminalised stealing from shops if the total was under $200 or something, which for me is just a madness. But every state in America is different, so hopefully you're in one of the sensible ones and not actually in London. Thank you very much for your call, Nigel. We're going to take a short break now. After that, we're joined by Rear Admiral Chris Parry, ex-NATO commander, to give us his view on the state of play in Iran. But more importantly than that, I want to get his view as a former Royal Navy commander as to what on earth was going on with, I see you sending your warships and your contraband oil, your sanctioned vessels right through the British Channel. I see you with your submarine sniffing around our undersea cables. Right, you might see it. What are you going to do about it? Let's find out quite how dire the situation is when it comes to our naval fleet just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Now, once upon a time, the United Kingdom was probably the greatest seafaring nation on earth. Indeed, it was with an astonishing fleet of naval vessels that we essentially set about creating an empire. The high seas were no stranger to the United Kingdom, once proud sponsors of Christopher Columbus. Were it not for the United Kingdom, what would the Americas look like? Were it not for the United Kingdom, what would be going on in Australia today? It never really daunted us going out to battle. Yeah, you bring your armada, Spain. What about Waterloo? Ha-ha, we still have Nelson standing aloft of his column, looking over central London. If he could see what was going on today, my goodness, he would turn in his grave. You almost want to laugh because really the reality of it is so farcical, it seems almost untrue. The images of a sanctioned Russian vessel, well, might not have been flagged to Russia, but taking contraband fuel to sell on the high seas straight through the Channel, being flanked by a big Russian warship and then scurrying along behind a UK naval vessel. Well, just before, Starmer had said, we're going to intercept the sale of contraband on the high seas. We're going to stop this shadow fleet from being able to fund Russia's war machine. Just you watch us. We're not going to tolerate any of this. And Putin has watched, hasn't he, as HMS Dragon failed to get out of ports for 3 weeks, unable to defend Akrotiri, not really having anything to accompany it in the naval fleet. He watched as it made its way gingerly over to the Middle East, and then he watched as it had to be taken back to port, and he thought, OK, all right, big shot, all right, chatty Starmer, let's put your words to the test. Turns out they were very hollow. Let's speak now to Rear Admiral Chris Parry, ex-NATO commander, former Royal Navy commander. Chris, I don't even know where to begin. I don't know where to begin with the state of the Navy, so I'm just going to hand the floor to you. How bad is it?
Well, by any comparison, it's dreadful, Alex. I mean, progressive governments, I'm afraid, have allowed the decline of our Navy. The country itself is subject to what I call sea blindness. We're a proud maritime nation. Obviously, the sea is the physical equivalent of the World Wide Web. If you're not engaged at sea anymore, you're not involved in globalization. And I'm afraid to say the decline of the Navy is an indication of how diminished we are as a country, to tell you the truth. But let's be certain here. The Labour government is living with the consequences not only of their own decisions, but of the decision, practically every decision since the end of the Cold War. It's something that I've railed against consistently, both in the media and in what I've written. I'm afraid if you rock the boat, you don't get anywhere. And I'm afraid in an electoral democracy, anything that happens beyond the next election doesn't really count. So all these strategic mistakes have been piling up. Everybody's been hoping at the top of the military and amongst politicians that their bluff won't be called. And suddenly their bluff has been called across multiple fronts and we've been found wanting.
Without a doubt, you're absolutely right when it comes to investment in defence. Just looking at the statistics here, in the 90s, 90 and 91, 3.3 to 4% of our GDP was being spent. The lowest point was 2016. It dropped down to 1.8%. 2018, 1.9%. Well, it's crept up to 2.3% now, but pretty terrible. And we've been exposed. But as well as having almost a non-existent fleet that can't seem to get out of dry dock, let alone into the high seas, it transpires that the Royal Navy has not seized any sanctioned Russian tankers because the government fears it would break international law. And that's despite Starmer saying a fortnight ago to go after the ship. So when Putin did send a warship escort to sanctioned vessels, we sort of trickled along behind it. And guess who? Guess who gave the advice that the ships could not be tackled in British territorial waters? Oh, that's right. It's always him, isn't it? It's Lord Hermer. So it isn't just a case of not really having much of a navy to speak of. Even the navy that we have aren't right to do anything. We've seen it in the Channel with the small boats. We're seeing it with Vladimir Putin. I mean, what is the blimmin' point, Chris?
Well, I think this is typical of a government, I'm afraid, where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing and they don't think through the consequences of quite a lot of these performative announcements. I think they do everything for the news cycle. They don't really think about how things are going to be implemented. If you look at the Chagos Islands issue, they didn't think through the strategic consequences of that. They just thought it would be a great performative trick to be able to give these islands away to Mauritius. They didn't think about the threat from China, the strategic position of the islands. I'm afraid it's the same with every one of our national institutions. They are simply doing everything for the news and electoral cycle. And as we get towards the local and county elections in May, it's going to get even worse. So they don't think whether we've got the capacity to do it or indeed the consequences of what they're saying. This is not a serious government, Alex.
No, I worry that it is a serious government. It's just serious in very much the wrong direction, which isn't in the interests of the United Kingdom or its people. Talk to me about the submarines, about Russian subs scouting, sniffing around for undersea cables. And haven't we been dropping, is it like sort of sonar or something underneath to sort of ping out a message which essentially says to them, we know you're down there? How at risk are we? Is this just a reconnaissance exercise? Is there a real possibility, if we're not able apparently to defend ourselves, that Russia now, having done the reconnaissance, can go back in there in earnest and actually cut some cables? Can we stop that? Can we defend it?
Well, I first raised the issue of cables in a book in 2014 as being vulnerable and what we should do about it. That's 12 years ago, Alex. So it tells you how quickly people react. The fact of life is Russian submarines have been prowling around our waters since the Cold War. They've had a unit that interferes with cables and seabed operations since 1986. It's called Googie. Their submariners are paid 5 times what normal submariners are paid. They've got about a dozen of these specialist submarines that do it. They're primarily used for operations in places like the Baltic and around our coasts. But back in the Cold War, Alex, we used to have nuclear submarines obtruding into the Clyde to try and look at our nuclear submarine base and things like that. We have their submarines looking for our ballistic missile submarines. This is nothing new. It's no good the government making up it's a big deal. It happens all the time, and they've just woken up to it. We drop sonar buoys all the time to try and pick up their... Let me explain, Alex. Every nuclear submarine gives off vibrations, and you can pick them up. The quietest submarines in the world are British submarines, I'm glad to say, and be in no doubt, our astute submarines are probably the best in the world. Then it's American, then it's Russian, and you can hear these vibrations at various distances with these sonobuoys, so you can pick them up. It's as simple as that. But we can't track them all of the time. So it's complete bluff to say we know where they are all of the time. We certainly know what operations they're getting up to because we have other intelligence sources. We've just got to intensify our activities to make sure our maritime borders are secure. And manifestly, they are not. Now, the government, as you say, has not allowed us to impose any restrictions on dinghies or any other people coming across our maritime borders. We've now woken up to the fact the Russians might be a bit interested in what's inside our territorial seas. Our biggest weakness, Alex, I'm afraid, is to the west of Ireland. Ireland has no navy to speak of, and the Russians are actually having a field day. I call it the Wild West. And until they start taking that seriously, the 75% of transatlantic cables that go through Irish waters or start in Ireland are going to be vulnerable.
Talking about those transatlantic cables, I'm assuming that they ultimately end in the United Kingdom and bring all sorts of information if you want to sort of, get internet access to something from America. Is that what we're talking about here?
Well, no, it means cutting the cables. It means you lose the ability to use it. You can route around it, rather like with the internet, but it's really inconvenient. One of the things that Edward Snowden gave away, and which he deserves to actually have a severe penalty for, is the fact that we in the free world are able to actually get into those cables and read what is going on. And for that alone, I'm afraid that's like telling Hitler we've got the Enigma machine. So he deserves severe punishment for that. But the fact of life is, if you cut cables, you basically, if you look at what's happening in the Baltic, for example, cables are being cut there, which is the sole link between, say, Finland and the Baltic states and things like that. Where you've got multiple cables, then you can route around. But sure enough, you can cut as many as it needs to disrupt an economy, for example. And don't forget, we've got pipelines. We've also got gas pipelines as well that also can be interrupted.
Do they ever do anything sort of in the Bristol Channel? I know that seems like an odd question, but I've developed a rather odd hobby of late, which is I'm obsessed with watching flight radar. And I keep noticing a lot of military reconnaissance stuff going around the sort of south coast of Wales and the Bristol Channel.
We can't talk about that, Alex.
Okay, fair enough. Right, OK. Before I let you go, Chris, I don't know what your current relationship is with Reform UK. At one point, you were going to be a mayoral candidate for them, and I don't know what's come to pass there. But there's a bit of a, to me, from the outside looking in, a bit of a gaping hole when it comes to the reform machine, which is there isn't any shadow defence spokesman. There isn't a shadow Foreign Secretary. They seem to have, well, a bit of a lackadaisical approach to talking about geopolitics at exactly the time when that is the biggest issue of the day.
Well, Alex, I don't know what my relationship with Reform is at the moment because they haven't actually told me. We've got an issue running at the moment where I would say the facts are at variance with decisions that have been made. But you're absolutely right. I've been trying to put an input into the defence debate within the party, but there aren't ears to listen at the moment. Well,
there you go. Rear Admiral Chris Parry, it's always great speaking to you, and maybe I'll send you a text and see what's going on in that Bristol Channel. Seriously, it's a weird new obsession I've got. I actually sort of wake up during the night now and sort of think, oh, I better check what's going on flight radar. Someone help me. I really need to get a life. OK, there we go. Keep your thoughts coming in on anything and everything, but mainly the news we're talking about. 03444991000 is the number if you'd like to dial us up and have a conversation. 87222 is the number to send a text message. Write the word talk before you send a text. And if you want to send a WhatsApp, it is also 03444991000. We're going to take a short break now. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the really great investment, putting the UK on the map as leaders in AI. We've got some of the best universities in the world. Apparently, it was a British guy who invented Bitcoin, but we just don't know who. He's like the Banksy of fintech. But we were essentially right up there of America's potential world leaders in these fields, certainly when it comes to academia and intelligence. But when it comes to investment, when it comes to actually having huge places to run this technology, well, we're now back of the field. Why? Just costs too much. Costs way too much. We're going to be discussing that with Andy Mayer, who's an energy analyst at the Institute of Economic Affairs, just after this.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Oh, one's on the move. I'm on flight radar. I can see you taking off from Buys Norton, have you? It's really good fun. Right, let's talk now about Ed Miliband. Let's talk about essentially what is a huge loss to the United Kingdom, because OpenAI were going to stick 31 billion pounds. Can you imagine 31 billion pounds investment in the United Kingdom to continue developing AI over here? And it requires huge data centres, which requires a whole lot of energy. And of course, they've pulled out. We're not going to become an AI superpower. Why? Well, simply costs too much money. Let's speak to Andy Mayer, energy analyst at the Institute of Economic Affairs. I'm sure you will be able to sum up what a needless and devastating blow this is to the United Kingdom far better than me, so go for it.
Well, Alex, thank you for that. The AI data centers can be thought of more simply as being brain farms, and their principal product is intelligence, and after this cancellation, the government's clearly missing both of them. What we need to think about here are three things. Firstly, the UK's very high energy costs, so about twice our EU rivals in some cases, and up to 3 to 4 times the US, which makes about 20% of the cost for a data centre very unattractive. The second thing is our crazy environmental and planning regime, which means that it could take 5 to 10 years to get something running that would actually only take 1 to 3 years to build, which is clearly very unattractive for the investors that have just decided to postpone their plans. And thirdly is copyright reform. In the US, you have a concept called fair use, which allows the AI companies to train their models on copyrighted material, provided they don't just then reproduce it verbatim. So if I read a book and then talk about it, I'm not breaching copyright. If I listen to a song and then hum my own tune based on that song, I'm not breaching copyright. But the creative industries in the EU have argued very successfully that training models should not be allowed to use their stuff if they want to opt out of it. And the UK is stuck between these two positions and hasn't yet made a decision. So the companies are getting fed up. And the position of the same company in the US is they want to invest $500 billion. That's 12 times as much as they were promising to invest in the UK. So it's not just that we've lost this investment potentially, but it's also the case that we are a small player in a very fast growing market, which the government was looking at as early as 2021 and saying that we needed to be ready for it. And clearly we're not.
£31 billion worth of investment. And it's not just by one firm, it's a number of them, as I understand, number of US tech firms. This deal, the tech prosperity deal, I remember actually that very first state visit by Donald Trump, and this was one of the big wins when Starmer came out saying, yes, because of all of this, look what we've got all of this stuff, we're going to have AI. I mean, it's turned out to nothing, but this was going to be in the north of England. And all of these data centres, this would have generated not just a sort of leading edge when it comes to the advancement of this technology, which scares me half to death, but you've got to be in the game if you want to try and not be defeated by it. But it potentially would have generated a huge amount of employment.
Potentially, yeah, but employment wouldn't have been the main gain. It'd have been employment, jobs and growth in all the other industries that use this stuff. I mean, to be really simplistic about it, there are two things that AI do, one of which is train these big models to do very specialist things. And that's where most of the value in AI business is. So if, for example, you're a London legal firm or a City of London firm investing in all sorts of fancy projects around the world, you can train an AI model to understand your business and then help your employees be much more productive. So there are gains across the economy. I mean, some people estimated early on that about a 10% gain in GDP would be possible.
10%?
Yeah, huge. So a opportunity not to be missed, and why people get so excited.
Sorry to put you on the spot about this, but a 10% gain in GDP, can you turn that into a sort of monetary unit?
Well, we're a $3 trillion economy, so 300 billion would be
300 billion. So this investment, which is not, we weren't paying for the 31 billion. This is US tech firms who are going to invest 31 billion into the United Kingdom. And as a result, our economy, from their investment of 31 billion, would have garnered about 300 billion. And it's not happening because what? We're woke?
Well, if we look at the AI Council's original 16 recommendations in 2021, they thought the fifth most important thing was equality and diversity and inclusion. And the 14th most important thing was alignment with the UK's net zero goals. So it's fairly clear to say that the government's priorities from the off, and not just this government, but the previous one, were completely muddle-headed. I mean, to get this stuff built, you need to be able to use the data, and you need to be able to ensure that your costs on energy are competitive, and you can actually build them in the first place because you're not stopped by local NIMBYs. So they've not done anything really to get past this other than talk about it in councils, create some concepts like AI growth zones, but the verdict on those AI growth zones is clearly they're not growing.
This is just utterly astonishing. And I keep saying that, where is Ed Miliband? I haven't seen him for a while. I keep fantasising that he's been locked in the Tower of London or something in disgust. But apparently not. He's been hanging out with his mates, hasn't he? Old Alistair Campbell, great friend of mine, and talking about how wonderful his policy for clean energy by 2030 is. Shall we have a look?
Countries around the world emulated us. We've got this mission, clean power by 2030. If we achieve that, and I'm absolutely determined we do, other countries will say, look what Britain's been able to do. We can do that too. So let's not have a diminished view of Britain. We really matter in this. So many countries come to me and say, you've got a really important responsibility here.
What is it? I mean, what is it? It looks like a Fraggle that's, I don't know. That thing is running our energy policy.
Yeah. I'm going to be fair to Ed. I mean, in one sense, there is alignment between this strategy and his net zero. And that's the only power that you can build quickly at the moment is solar power. So that provides a little bit of a boost if you want to have a grid-connected AI data center. But that's not a long-term solution. And realistically, if you want these things, which each one can add about 1% to the UK's demand for energy. You need firm power, and that is nuclear or gas at the moment.
I mean, this is the thing, right? You say that we're able to build solar power quickly all over our green and pleasant land, and I know that he's approving these mass solar farms, even when there's huge public objection. But doesn't it come with a huge amount of risk? It wasn't that long ago that Spain's national grid seemed to sort of blow up temporarily because of surges in their solar power system.
Well, yes, and the risk here is if the only thing they've got available to support this strategy is solar, and they start building it, then that's only covering about 9 to 11% of the needs of the site. The rest of it will be going into the rest of the grid, which will then destabilising other things, because the grid we have at the moment is already getting into risky territory, and it can't cope with a massive increase of demand for electricity. So huge problems could be coming down the line if they get this wrong. And realistically, the best thing they could do is to get these centres to build separate to the grid, and maybe connect later once they've got built, and remove some of the barriers to putting proper power solutions like small modular reactors, or if they can get the turbines, gas power. And then you might actually have a chance of getting data centres into the ground and working in 5 years as opposed to 10 to 15.
Oh, Andy, you're very diplomatic there with the use of "if they get this wrong." I think that "if" was doing a lot of heavy lifting. Andy, thank you ever so much. Andy Mayer, energy analyst at the Institute of Economic Affairs. I almost want to watch that clip again just to give myself nightmares tonight. I mean, what is it? Oh, everyone should be following Britain. Look how wonderful we are. Look at how we are. We're going to lead the world in self-flagellating at the altar of net zero. We're going to have no factories, and everyone's going to want to copy us. What are you? I mean, seriously, does this man practice his lines in front of the mirror? Does he look at energy bills? Does he look at the fact we don't have OpenAI investing 31 billion that would have reaped a 300 billion pound, 10% extra to our national GDP? And does he still think that people are taking him seriously with that performance? Right, we're going to take a short break now. I need a cup of tea. I recommend you go get a coffee. Back just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, Hi, welcome back. I'm rather regretting doing an Ed Miliband impression just before the break. Someone out there is going to have blimmin' memed that, aren't they? And it's going to be used to troll me for the rest of my life. Oh, well, I don't read comments on social media, so knock yourselves out, why don't you? Right. Sorry, I'm just still looking at my flight radar there. Very interesting things afoot coming out of the airports. Anyway, let us go back to domestic news, shall we? Apparently, Sadiq Khan is demanding stronger action on the social media outrage economy. Is that what's keeping you awake at night, Mr. Khan? I mean, like I said, just don't read the comments. Just, you know, you can ignore them. It's like kids in a playground bullying one another. You don't have to partake. And in terms of the outrage economy, he's the first one to put in his, you know, whatever it is, your handle bio, that's it, in your bio, that he's London maxing. He feeds the outrage economy. He thrives off the outrage economy. Let's speak now to Ben Habib, leader of Avance UK. I mean, this is just so typical, isn't it, of Sadiq Khan? London's burning, shoplifting everywhere, crime aplenty, people getting stabbed. Again, that poor wee lad getting, you know, killed in, was it Primrose Hill? And he's talking about the outrage economy on social media.
Was he banging on about disinformation as well from a man who thinks men can have babies and that men can identify as women and that immigrants built London and that we should be ashamed of our national heroes? This guy is full of disinformation. He's a complete... well, we know what he is. I don't have to say it on air. I think we know precisely what he is, don't we, Alex?
Well, yeah, we do. Woke, useless, despicable, two-faced, incompetent, cynical, and full of hate. Let's talk about Starmer. See what I did there? I mean...
Same description applies.
Yeah, I can't... I'm running out of things to say in this show without repeating myself, because the level of audacity, the fact that he's, you know, going about the Arab states, wading into a conflict he doesn't seem to want to get involved in at all, that he actually is getting in the way of America from doing anything about, then having the audacity to say he's fed up with the likes of Trump and Putin for destabilising the international fuel economy, because he's got some mad net zero zealot as the energy secretary who he doesn't seem to be able to stand up to. We've got the Tony Blair Institute saying drill in the North Sea. We've got backbenchers, we've got industries, we've got the unions, we've got pretty much everybody else on planet Earth looking at him going, it makes no sense. The fact that 40s oil is at record prices. Brent might have dropped a little bit, but the very oil that we can get out of the North Sea, which is good to go, you get it out freshly, bam, you barely have to do any refining on it. I don't understand how the oil stuff works, but I was reading this morning and it sounds like pretty decent stuff. It's in our territorial waters, and he's not touching it. And when he's quizzed about this, he's like, well, it's not under my purview. The legislation that the Conservative Party brought in means that that decision rests solely with the Energy Secretary. You're the Prime Minister. Why is he so weak?
Well, I think with Trump, he's seen an opportunity to do what he's always wanted to do, which is break the link with the United States of America so that he can firm up his link with Europe. You might recall, Alex, in September 2023, he was caught when he thought he was off camera in Montreal saying that if he were ever to become Prime Minister, he would bring us so close to the European Union that we'd effectively have rejoined it in all but name. And I think he sees this schism over Iran as his opportunity to say, well, forget about America. We need to be much more, he'll say it's independent, but what he means is much more European focused as far as our military is concerned. Have joined this European Defence Union, which he's so keen to get into, which is effectively giving up our military to the European Union, get closer economically to the European Union, allow more laws to be made in Brussels, and to hell with the United States of America. What he doesn't realise, which I think every single Brexiteer and vast majority of sane-minded people in this country realise, is that the EU is sinking. And, you know, the EU's economic model is an absolute basket case. And the reason it's a basket case is for all the same ideological reasons you've just cited. You know, they're not drilling, they're not making themselves energy independent. They're open to mass migration. They put other people's interests over and above the interests of their own people. And Starmer is of all those ideologies. It would make perfect sense. You know, one of the key lessons from Iran, the Iran war, is that we must be more energy secure. And that can only happen if we get more of our energy from our own sources. And as you rightly say, we've got masses of gas in the North Sea. We've got 187 billion tons of coal under our feet, which we could extract and use to fire up our now closed coal fire stations, but we could build them again or reopen them. We seem intent, Starmer seems intent on sacrificing this country's independence, its prosperity and its security on his ideological altars, of which there are basically two, just to recap. The two ideological altars are net zero and ever closer union with the European Union. Those are the two things which he is hell-bent on delivering, which in my mind makes him anti-British, because he doesn't want to do anything that's good for this country in its own right.
I mean, what do you make of the future of NATO? Donald Trump, as we all know, and I don't know why people are surprised every time he does a sensationalist post or says, we're going to destroy you, we're going to invade Greenland. He says these things to try and force someone's hand. You just have to read The Art of the Deal. It's been his playbook as a businessman. It's been his playbook the whole time as American president. And yet every time he does it, everyone reacts with sort of this, you know, shock and disgust. And we're so offended because of the language he's using. Isn't it terrible? And more often than not, it seems to work. I think it's a bit like the boy who cried wolf. It's potentially starting to wear thin. Starmer's chirped today saying, well, you know, being in NATO is of America's interest, because Donald Trump has turned around and said, well, why is it? We seem to be called upon when you want us to sign a massive check for Ukraine, even though you're not doing enough to defend what's happening in your own backyard. And then when I'm trying to do something even bigger, which is to stop a crazy theocratic state from getting a nuclear weapon, you're nowhere to be seen. And yet it is not just the United Kingdom that's sort of doing this, that's getting in the way of what America is trying to prosecute. It frankly is most of the Western European nations, including Italy, which rather surprises me, but there you go. I don't know how things play out domestically back at home. I for the life of me, cannot understand why Western European countries are not just being a bit lily-livered about getting themselves involved. I can sort of see the logic in that in terms of being weak in the face of the fifth column of Islamists that seem to be increasingly dictating politics in the United Kingdom and everywhere else by actively threatening our own security. But they seem to be trying to prevent America from doing anything, and I just can't wrap my head around that. Is there a chance that a lot of that we're preventing America doing things, simply rhetoric to appease those dark forces that I described earlier, when actually perhaps behind the scenes there's a bit more cooperation than we're letting on?
No, I think Europe has stood against America for decades. Europe essentially is socialist. It's very, very socialist. Big government intervention. You can't do anything. You know, they've got a civil code approach to governance. To their legislation. We have common law here, which allows us to do whatever we want to, whenever we want to, unless there's a specific law prohibiting it. Europeans aren't allowed to do anything unless there's a specific law that allows them to do it. They're control freaks. They're essentially socialists. They want high taxation, high state intervention. And they've always looked at America, even when the Democrats have been in charge, because the Democrats are to the right of most European political parties and governments. And they've always looked at America with antipathy. They hate the capitalist system. They hate aspiration over dependency. They hate what you call personal agency. I've heard you use that expression a number of times. They hate personal agency. And America stands for personal agency. And we used to, in this country, we used to stand for aspiration over dependency, a go-getting, daring-do, pro-British, anything can be delivered if we just put our minds to it. That ambitious, enthusiastic approach to life, which is British and American. And the Europeans are not. They're inherently depressed people because they have governments and Brussels controlling every move they make. So there's always a tension, I think, between Europe and the States. And what we're now seeing in the UK is an extreme left-wing almost Marxist government with Starmer, saying, yeah, great, we've got our opportunity to join this bunch of losers in Europe and ditch the expansive, enthusiastic, ambitious, aspirational-led American model. That's what I think is going on here.
I mean, Ben, you're a CEO. You know how to run businesses internationally. And surely a lot of running anything successfully is being able to prioritise what is urgent, what needs to be dealt with that day, where the money needs to be going. Yes, there are things that are nice to do when you've got a bit of money in the bank and a bit of spare time. But it seems to me that the more I read about the sort of crazy stuff this government's doing, the digital ID cards, they've just done a consultation. Always a consultation. Just make a decision, for crying out loud. Always some wasteful consultation. This time on whether or not it should have gender or sex by biology on digital ID. And I'm looking at this going, first of all, it's a profligate waste. You don't need a consultation. Just get it on there. F or M. Choose. Tick the box. You know what you were born as. Second of all, I kind of feel that that's last year's debate. It's done now. And yet this government seemed to, like, you know, messing about in the shallows, in the paddling pool of wokery, when literally the country's economy is falling apart. We're deindustrialising at a rate of knots. There's wars going on around the world and we've got no Royal Navy.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. You know, it's interesting to see Blair pivot. Blair, I think, is perhaps the biggest devil in British politics that's ever existed. He put in place the foundations for the destruction that we are now experiencing in the United Kingdom, the Human Rights Act, the Equalities Act, this tilt towards net zero, mass migration, freedom of movement, all of that was under Blair. But even Blair, being the political animal he is, recognizes now and is saying that we've got to drill more. He recognizes that we've got to protect our borders. And the reason he's coming round to that is because he sees that the British people have woken up to the complete idiocy of the way the country's being governed. But Starmer still hasn't got there. And I don't know whether he's supremely stupid, which is certainly one possibility, or he's held hostage by his backbenchers, or a bit of both. But you'll recall, Alex, when he tried to cut the welfare budget by $5 billion, which represents 1.6% of the welfare budget. He couldn't get it through his own party, and they ended up actually increasing spending at a time when actually this country cannot afford a single more penny being spent on welfare. We've got to cut our welfare bill back dramatically so that businesses can thrive again. We are going to hell in a handcart under these extreme left-wing policies.
Not just that, Ben, but if you want to know the most ridiculous piece of news today, you know this open AI investment that was supposed to be coming in? It was a combination of big American tech firms who were all grouping together to pour £31 billion into creating big AI hubs in the United Kingdom so we could be world leaders in what is going to be, of our generation, the most important technology ever to be invented. And that 31 billion, I've been told, was going to someone else's money they were giving to us, was going to our national GDP of 10%, which would be about £300 billion. So American companies wanted to give 31 billion to invest in the UK, which would have given us 300 billion pounds. So forget the 4 billion or whatever it was of the welfare cuts, 300 billion. And they're not doing it now because of copyright rubbish coming from the EU that we're still tied into, because of energy costs, because of planning permission, because of everything that this government represents. 300 billion pounds gone. Gone.
Yeah. And we're going to see much, much more of this. Businesses are not going to open up in the United Kingdom. Taxes are too high, costs are too high, growth is too low. Why would you come to the United Kingdom to open a business now? Why would you do it? We're seeing all our bright young heading off. Well, they were heading off to Dubai. Some have now been forced back. But, you know, if you can go abroad and you get law and order, security, zero income tax levied, and you've got economies that are growing, you're going to go, aren't you, as a young, bright individual, or as a businessman, or as someone looking to open up their business in some tax-efficient, dynamic economy. You're not going to come to the moribund United Kingdom. And it's a tragedy because every time we see more damage being done. Instead of learning their lesson, as you said, they're doing more of the same. They layer it on even more. They talk about growth, but how can you have growth when you've got the knee of the state on every working person's neck and every businessman's neck as well? You can't do it. There will be no growth. We are just going to sink. And if there isn't growth, they won't get the tax take they need, and they won't be able to spend the money that they wish to spend on welfare and all their other schemes. And more importantly, at least from my perspective, and I'm sure yours, we won't be able to spend enough money to secure this nation. Our military is absolutely gobsmackingly awful by comparison, certainly by comparison to what it was. And I think also in absolute terms, forgive me if I'm offending anyone in the military at the moment, but that's how it is. It took them 2 weeks to get HMS Dragon battle ready. And once it got out to the Aegean, it promptly broke down. I was speaking to Rear Admiral Chris Parry, whom I know you know as well.
He was on the show earlier.
Oh, and I'm sure perhaps he said this, but he told me that when Margaret Thatcher declared war on the Falklands, the ship of which he was in charge was 96% battle ready anyway. It was in Gibraltar. And within 2 hours, they got it to 100% battle ready, and they were sailing off to the Falklands. And now we couldn't get one blooming, what was it, a Type 45 destroyer or something, HMS Dragon, out to the Aegean in a competent, workmanlike manner in under 2 weeks. It's terrible. And then we see Iran firing intercontinental ballistic missiles at our base in Chagos, and we don't respond. And we say, well, this is not our war. Well, I think if Iran is firing ballistic missiles at us, it becomes our war. You know, it's almost a farce, isn't it? The bemoaning the oil price going up, but yet they're not prepared to do anything to require Iran to open the Straits of Hormuz. Have you seen any commentariat, other than perhaps yourself and GB News, criticize Iran for blocking the Straits of Hormuz, which is an international crime, which is a war crime? They're almost clapping it on. They almost get some pleasure out of the fact that Iran has hit back. And, you know, when Iran bombs Qatar, Bahrain, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and other places, what the mainstream media call it is asymmetric warfare. And again, they're cheering it on. This isn't asymmetric warfare. This is terroristic warfare. This is Iran lashing out at non-combatants in an aggressive terrorist way.
I cannot understand when people watch, you know, the aforementioned sorts of channels and commentariats who all seem to be, like you said, cheering on Iran and repeat their ridiculous, like, what is the plan? How are people so brainwashed and deluded to not recognise Iran as the monsters that they are? Even the beloved UN, normally held up by the left wing as the, you know, paragons of virtue and honesty, turned around and said, well, you know, there's really enriched uranium knocking about somewhere under a pile of rubber. Perhaps we ought to see to that. Even they know that their weapons inspectors weren't allowed into Iran, and even that is being ignored. Normally, anything that comes out of the UN headquarters of New York is considered veridical truth. Not this time. I wish I had my specs with me, but I don't, Ben, because I'd love to watch your facial expression as I read you a bit of breaking news I've just received. So you're just going to have to describe it to me later in a text message. Apparently, I just can't even. I actually can't, like, seriously. Sailors tracking Russian warships through the Channel are going to go on strike next week. They're going to go on strike. Personnel from the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, which is the civilian support wing of the Royal Navy, are walking out on Thursday in a long-running row over pay. The Telegraph revealed on Wednesday that seafarers on RFA Tide Force, a 39,000-ton tanker, were deployed to follow a heavily armed Russian frigate of the south coast instead of a British warship, because, of course, we don't have any of those functioning. But now staff have said they've had years of substandard wages. Demands facing crews have continued to increase. I mean, they must look at the situation and go, I don't know why I bother, so let's just down tools. I hardly blame them, to be honest. But, I mean, not only do we not have anything seemingly seaworthy that sort of, you know, looks like a Royal Navy warship, but the civilian support fleet are going to be going on strike.
It's just so depressing.
Do we need to build a bunker, Ben? Do we need to go? Like, is it? Are they coming now? I mean, if I was looking to invade the UK, and quite frankly, I wouldn't want it. I'd be like, what is the point? Although I wouldn't mind some of our oil and gas fields, quite frankly. I'd probably just. Do you know what? If I was going to invade the UK, I'd be like, forget it. Let's just drill the whole thing for shale gas. But if I was going to, if I was going to stage an attack against us, it would be next week. This is. We laugh, but it's terrifying.
Oh, I think we're very vulnerable. Very, very vulnerable. The fact that we've got Russian subs swimming around in our waters, having a look at our cables, sizing us up, is something we should be very concerned about. Healy coming on, doing that press conference saying, "We see you," is not going to scare the Russians one jot. They know we couldn't get HMS Dragon out in under 2 weeks. Right. They know we're incapable of defending ourselves against an attack. And of course, if they do attack, we'd scale up pretty quickly and we'd have America behind us, I hope.
I don't know, but do you hope? You think we can scale up quickly? Even the civilians, even the Royal Fleet Auxiliary are going to be on strike. Our warships don't work, and Donald Trump, quite frankly, doesn't think much of us or our Prime Minister right now.
No, I don't blame the Americans for holding us in a really low regard at the moment. We have absolutely rejected the hand of friendship from across the Atlantic. And Starmer, remember, Starmer was treated incredibly well by Trump to start with. I was looking at Trump's behavior with Starmer, allowing Starmer to tell lies effectively to the president about freedom of speech, being alive and kicking in the United Kingdom and so on. And Trump buying all of that and accepting it. And now Trump, first of all, I think he sued through the Chagos deal. It took a while for Trump to call it out, but he called it out. And now he's seen through Starmer completely. He's seen what a duplicitous, useless bit of rubbish that Starmer is. So that arrangement between the United States of America and the United Kingdom, special relationship, whatever you want to call it, that is broken for the moment. And I hope we could rely on America, but it is just hope.
No, exactly. And I think you're right. I think that actually he is very charitable at the beginning, because the idea that Trump didn't know the sort of things that Starmer and his cohort in cabinet had been saying about him, the Sadiq Khans, the David Lammies, making all this noise about his character, he would have known that. He's not an idiot. He would have been briefed. And I think you're right. I think he was being very charitable because he loves the United Kingdom. And so he thought, I'm going to give the guy a chance. And you're right. He let Starmer say in front of the world's press, no, we don't have a problem with free speech. Trump knows full well what has been going on. Everyone knows full well. The world knows full well what has been going on. And again and again and again, that patience has been tested. And Starmer turns around and says he's fed up with Trump, lumping in the same category as Putin because we've got no energy self-sufficiency. The man is, I don't know. Do you think he's going to be gone after May?
Well, what's the point of removing him? You're just going to get some other nutter who could be worse. Yeah. At least we know what Starmer is, and at least we can hold him responsible and not allow anyone new to come in. If someone new comes in, they'll blame everything on Starmer while they go about doing even more damage. At the moment, at least we know who the enemy is, and we can keep targeting them. I think it'll be good if Starmer remains in office, frankly. But what we've got to make sure, of course, Alex, is that in 2029 we have a proper pro-British, common sense-based government that will reverse all this nonsense and make Britain great again.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, after May, I think the writing's going to be on the wall as who's going to be in the best position to form that government. Would you back them? Would you back Reform UK when it comes to the crunch?
Well, we need to see what happens between now and 2029. This is where you and I might have a bit of a debate.
Ben, come on. Come on, Ben. We've been on this earth a long time. You a lot more than me. I've been in politics before coming back to broadcasting for a long time. The writing's on the wall. I don't think any other party, with all the will in the world, can upscale fast enough to be able to fight and win a general election. That's just that's not taking sides in terms of politics or policy. No. There's frankly not a fag paper between all of these parties. But, there's one party which has got branches, which has got, big offices, which has got lots of staff, which is leading in the polls.
We're in very dangerous territory at the moment because, as you and I discussed, I think, at the weekend, what the polls aren't picking up is the inclination of those who vote Green to actually vote, whereas those who say they'll vote Reform or Conservative are likely not to turn up.
Is it worth, essentially, for the want of sort of pettifogging and nitpicking, lobbing missiles in Reform's direction, when the result of that could be all of these very motivated Green Party voters having Zach Polanski as Deputy Prime Minister, for crying out loud?
Well, I can assure you, for what it's worth, I can assure you and all viewers that any action, to the extent that I'm able to influence events in any way, any action we take, I take, will be supportive of a pro-British government at the next election, without a shadow of a doubt.
Good man, Ben. Good man indeed. Thank you so much for joining us today. Oh dear, I can't even... Now the civilians in the Royal Navy are going on strike. I mean, like, honestly, I'm glad I've got a cellar in my house, quite frankly, because I'm going to start filling it with cans of food. Right, OK, we're going to take a short break now. Why don't you cheer me up? Go on, please try. This is the number to call to help Alex put a smile on her face. 03444991000. It's your normal network rate. It's an act of charity right now, quite frankly. You can also use that number to send me a cheery voice message. Or 87222 is a number to send a text. Write the word talk before you type out your message. I can't wait to speak to some of you just after this.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, before I speak to some of you, we've got a very special guest indeed, retired United States Navy SEAL, former Deputy Commander of United States Central Command, Robert Harwood, joins us now. Robert, first time we're speaking to one another, which is a real pleasure and a privilege for me. Oh, come on. Give it to me gently. How bad is the United Kingdom? Well, maybe not us, but our Prime Minister right now in the eyes of America.
Well, no, we're partners. We always have and always will be. The issue is when our national interests are going to align. And I think energy is one of those issues we align on at the end of the day, and Great Britain probably more so than us. So I think the support and effort to ensure the flow of oil through the Straits of Hormuz is on the top of the list for both sides of the table. And ultimately, we will be partnered in ensuring that remains available to everyone. We're going through a hard time at the moment, obviously, but this is a long-term problem that's going to have to be addressed. I think ultimately the government of the United Kingdom will realize that they have to be involved.
So what is the state of play? Because it's very hard to discern what is going on. I don't really know when people talk about negotiations or, discussing ceasefires with Iran, quite who they're talking to. Not even sure that Ayatollah is living and breathing. Who knows? We've got no video evidence of that. And it seems to me that, there's talk of ceasefires and elements of Iran, which needs to be fractured under various different levels of leadership, are still chucking bombs into the Middle East, still trying to prevent the flow of cargo through the Strait of Hormuz. And Donald Trump has declared this ceasefire, but is he going to stick to it? Because it seems like, to me, a great job's been done so far. I personally am wholly supportive of degrading Iran's capabilities militarily, particularly in developing horrific, deadly, nihilistic weapons. But it seems like this ceasefire's come at a time when it's like, oh, one last push and you might be able to get even more done.
Well, I would call this a strategic pause on both sides of the table. And we're watching, if it comes to fruition, an unprecedented meeting tomorrow. You have the most senior level representatives from the United States, being the vice president, and from Iran itself, the prime minister, the minister of foreign affairs. So that in itself is a step in the right direction. Now, the question is, who really knows who's making the decisions in Iran? And more importantly, not just from a policy effort, but from an implementation. And I would still suggest, I've always said this, it is the IRGC. They control Iran. There's no doubt about it. And you've seen two different strategies at play from the start of the war. Israel has been focused on strategic leadership, the IRGC. So as you see, I'm the new Ayatollah. Okay, well, your life expectancy is going to be pretty short. And they're pushing that down even to the level of the IRGC. How much of the leadership can they eradicate and get rid of for the long-term solution? The U.S., on the other hand, priority has been the missiles and drones specifically, and then, of course, moving oil through the Straits of Hormuz. And both of those take different capacity, different prioritization. So these talks may bring all that together, what we're going to focus on. What is the solution, top down or bottom up? And that could be what's going to drive this to a new tipping point, be in Iran or outside Iran. And then finally, and as you so astutely recognize, what's going on inside Iran? President Trump, half of his rationale for involving here is that the IRGC and the regime was out shooting people. They wanted help. He made a commitment. Help is on the way. Well, the help's there now. And no one knows, just like the leadership, what's actually going on the ground in Iran. And you're seeing indicators of that. But as you said, based on some strategies involving deception and just lack of information, those are still the unknowns. And we may get some clarity on all of those issues predicated on the talks tomorrow.
Well, this is really fascinating to me, actually. I think this is the first time this is really being discussed in the United Kingdom. So I want to probe into this a little bit more. Is there a sense, perhaps, that the political leaders of Iran, I'm not saying that they're going to become the West's best mates and we're going to be lovey-dovey and see eye to eye, but there is a possibility that some sort of arrangement could be struck because they might want rid of the IRGC as well?
Well, there could be struck, but what are the Iranian people willing to accept? So I think the end state from an Israeli perspective is a government in place that renounces the Islamic Revolution and all the policies that came with it. As you said, nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, locking up and controlling the Straits of Hormuz. And you're seeing in this negotiations where the Iranians are trying to set the precedents where they give permission for people to go through the Straits. That's never happened before. So that'd be a real coup for them. But I don't think the United States is going to accept that. So there's components of this where Israel needs different objectives than the United States. And that's a government that goes back to denouncing it and moves it with different policies than the Islamic Revolution has, where the U.S. is focused more on the oil traffic and the ballistic missiles. And then finally, funding their surrogates, be it Hezbollah, Hamas, as you're seeing the conflict in Lebanon continue. So I think we're going to get our best indicators tomorrow, what comes out of these discussions as we all enjoy this current strategic pause. And I would add one last thought. Trump's number one goal was, hey, we're going to get the Straits of Hormuz open. Well, basically, if the Iranians let oil, if they cooperate aid on that front, you could get progress.
I mean, surely, I think the Iranians need that to be open themselves because they also make money from selling their oil. But I hate to be tedious about this, but there are so many people in the United Kingdom who don't seem to get the point of attacking Iran in the first place. I'm not one of them, but it amazes me how many people, whether they're on the BBC or watch the BBC, seem to think that, well, the JCPOA was doing a fine old job. Iran weren't anywhere close to having a nuclear weapon. Why did we go and start all this in the first place? It was a totally unnecessary act of aggression that's now plunged the world into economic uncertainty. Can you clear up some of those matters for us? Because as far as I'm concerned, I strongly believe that Iran probably was very close to developing extremely terrifying weapons, and with the psychology of that regime, those weapons would be more dangerous than they are in the hands of someone like Vladimir Putin. But people out there in the United Kingdom just don't seem to be buying that. They seem to think it's all some sort of made-up fairy tale and Trump has lost his marbles.
Well, I think the facts speak for themselves. So let's just focus on the facts. They had enough highly enriched uranium to produce 10 or more bombs. That's irrefutable. That's been confirmed by the IAEA. We know that. We have watched them increase their capacity to refine and process that highly enriched uranium to weapons-grade material. They had kept building the number of centrifuges and the capacity of those centrifuges so they could do that in a matter of a week. So that's irrefutable. Everyone acknowledges that fact. So now they have the material. Second is weaponizing that material. And those are definitely two different programs. And you've watched the Israelis focus on that for decades. If you were the top nuclear scientist, you were going to have the same life expectancies as the Ayatollahs. And they had targeted them. They'd gone after their information. So they codified that. You saw them launch a missile that ranged Diego Garcia, which is indicative of a weapons program. Those weapons could reach Europe. So it's irrefutable. They had the missiles with the range. They had the material. They could process it. And can you live with that realization that when they brought that together, they are a direct and insurmountable threat to Europe?
Yeah.
So look, Russia and China, because of that capability, have been insurmountable to challenge. The risk is too great, so nuclear deterrence has worked. Can you imagine bringing Iran into that same fold? The West would have a strategic, insurmountable problem that is a direct threat beyond Russia in Europe. So the facts speak for themselves, and you'd almost have to be blind not to see that.
I think you'd have to be unhinged not to accept that. Just finally, Robert, before I let you go, we're talking about the Strait of Hormuz. The focus now of where we are is the Strait of Hormuz. There are important conversations happening tomorrow. I think it's probably in Iran's own economic interest for that strait to be opened up. But if there can't be any sort of resolution on that front, and Iran's clearly going to want to drive a very hard bargain, I'd imagine America may have to swallow things it doesn't particularly want to in those negotiations. But in the event that there is a stalemate, that nothing can be done, or that Iran continue doing what they've been doing, quite frankly, for a long time through the funding of the Houthis, is there a military way for America to be able to go in and by force make sure that strait is reopened? Or is that going to be the sort of challenge that, quite frankly, is hard even for a country with the prowess of America to undertake?
No, we can do it. The United States can do it. It's the issue at what cost and what risk. So I think that, again, is going to play out these negotiations and those two end states we talked about. So, no, the United States can do it. Additional forces are still closing to the region. The president demonstrated, and the administration, the Department of War demonstrated with the rescue of the pilot, that they can go into Iran anytime and any place they want, establish a beachhead. And that's not just Karg Island. Karg Island, instead of staying, you may do a raid, go in, make sure no one's on the island and it's unusable, and you leave, and then take out anything that's trying to come and go from the island so you don't have boots on the ground long-term at risk. You could do those same things in Bandar Abbas. You could do them on the islands. So all those options are on the table. But yes, the United States, if they're committed to do that, they have the capability to do it.
Robert Harwood, it has been fascinating talking to you. I'm so delighted you gave up your time to talk to us today. Retired United States Navy SEAL and former Deputy Commander of United States Central Command. If the United States needed to reopen the Strait of Hormuz by force, they could, but extremely important negotiations happening tomorrow. Didn't hear any of that on the BBC, did you? Right, let's squeeze in some calls. Let's speak to Paul in Tyneside. Hi there, Paul.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
Yeah, good. So with regards to the shoplifting,
yeah,
so public houses can put doormen on to stop ne'er-do-wells getting in. Petrol stations in silent hours will want proof of payment before they'll activate the pump.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was always brought up to believe, that where there's a will, there's a way, and where there is no will, you have to question that. So I would just be interested to see what the HMRC returns are from these big Tesco's and all the big supermarkets and stuff when they put the return in, and how much they actually put down to a loss.
Right. No, it's really interesting, actually, because, I was sort of suggesting earlier that when they decided to get rid of cashiers to save money because salaries, pensions, etc., probably cost a lot more than the amount of product being lifted from their shelves where people trusted to scan their own items, I think they sort of chalked it up as still a huge saving. But perhaps that then helped to contribute to the uptick in criminality because people suddenly realised that there was no shame. They didn't have to barge. I mean, the shame's gone anyway. But you make an interesting point there, Paul. I mean, where there is a will, there is a way. It'd be interesting to see now what supermarkets do to try and roll out systems to stop the level of shoplifting we're seeing today, because clearly, by our exclusive report, enough has not been undertaken. Let's speak now to Matthew, who's in Warrington. Good afternoon, Matthew.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Matthew.
Are you all right?
I'm very well. How are you?
Great, Joe. You're firing on all cylinders today.
Well, you know what? I had a little bit of a break down the south coast and enjoyed some lovely weather.
Oh, you've come back on Red Diesel. Loved it. So the one I said to you before was, I think once the king has been and done his trip to America and seen Trump, I think Trump is going to go for Starmer big time. I think we're going to have the local elections. He's going to be a dead man walking, so to speak. And I think Trump's going to let rip. I don't think he's ever forgotten the fact that Labour sent party members over to America when the elections are going on to go against him. He'll never let that drop. And I think May is going to be the merry month of May, because I think Starmer's gone. I think he's going to rip into about our defences. I've seen him on the telly the other day and he was stuttering and blinking when he was asked about air defences, which we haven't got now. What would happen if Britain got attacked? And he didn't know what to say. He just said, we've got NATO, we've got NATO. Well, we haven't. It's a bit late when we've already been bombed or attacked to ask the NATO, so what are we going to do to prevent us getting bombed and attacked? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing.
I mean, look, I agree that Donald Trump is clearly no longer much of a fan of Sir Keir Starmer, but perhaps people around Donald Trump, I don't know how much attention they pay to the United Kingdom. There must be someone somewhere in the Oval Office in the Pentagon whose brief it is, watch Britain. But, maybe he's also looking at the United Kingdom and going, at least Starmer, better the devil you know. Starmer does have the propensity to suck up every now and then. He's quite easy to push about, isn't he? Yet Lord knows if Starmer goes and it was someone like Angela Rayner who came in, I don't know whether, America would actually want to see that, whether that's a more appealing proposition for them.
I think if Rayner or Millipede comes in, I think the banks will pull the plug. I think there'll be a general election. There'll be another Liz Truss moment. I think that's what will happen.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely... Matthew, I've got to go to debate, but I think you've banged it spot on, nail on head with that. I think if Starmer goes and he's replaced by someone even more left-wing, the markets will go... I think you're right. I think that's a brilliant observation. Matthew, thank you ever so much for your call. OK, we're going to be taking a break now. Even more terrifying than the idea of Miliband or Rayner becoming the Prime Minister is perhaps a coalition of the left wing, because May's elections are going to see, I think, a collapse in the Labour vote. I mean, it takes some sort of divine intervention for otherwise. I think we can all agree with that. But then you look at the Green Party surging in the polls, and what terrifies me, I'm almost now in the camp where we should have cancelled those blooming things after all, because I don't mean that. But what terrifies me is I think in realpolitik, the Greens are actually going to start taking control of councils. That means places under the stewardship of radical left-wing politicians who have some pretty crazy ideas. The latest crazy idea from Zach Polanski, and it's not as bad as legalising drugs, prostitution, getting rid of the nuclear deterrent, getting rid of the Church of England, having totally open borders to anybody and everybody. I mean, that stuff really terrifies me. Two seconds of that and we're gone. Arbitrarily wants to just ban horse racing, all of horse racing. Do you know, I know someone who's going to be pretty upset by that. Rupert Bell, talkSPORT's racing commentator. He joins us after this.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. I've already got my eyeballs deep into the special pull-out of Grand National Sweepstakes. I love the Grand National. I'm not, you know, Little Miss Horse Racing, and I really don't like it when horses fall over and get injured at all. I don't think anybody does. But the Grand National is the one race where I have to have a bit of a flutter. Well, that wouldn't stay for long, would it, if Zach Polanski gets anywhere near power? It's probably not the worst of the worst of the worst things he's proposing, but I don't care for it, and I doubt neither does Rupert Bell. Rupert, I mean, why do people have it in for horse racing? It's not just an economic question, is it? As far as I'm concerned, horses like running around.
Yes, and bearing in mind, this nation and everywhere was founded on horsepower. They drove the world until the development of the motor car, and now you have cars that are described with what level of horsepower they've got. The horse has been an integral part of everything to do with the human race from time immemorial. But what he's talking about, and I believe it's on some tweets over the years, that he's suggesting that racing should be banned. Well, it is a huge driver of the economy. Yes, there are, you know, as you alluded to, there are some downsides to the sport, which none of us enjoy that much, but if at all. But what is important, these horses are cared for. If it wasn't horse racing, there wouldn't be a thoroughbred breed. There just wouldn't. And it is a huge driver of the economy. So it is I suppose it feels like another go at rural traditions within this country. Racing has a huge demographic following of all sorts of people. And this meeting at Aintree is an example of that. You know, Merseyside people are turning out in their thousands today to enjoy the spectacle of horse racing. So if it is an old tweet, I think the Green Party have said they would ban the whip in the sport and other things. But actually, if this is what he feels, and he must have felt it to tweet it, then, you know, heaven help the rest of us, because that is just about as bonkers as it gets, because racing is, as I say, a huge part of the fabric of this country. And yes, it's not a perfect sport by any means, but it is certainly something that people enjoy. And what we've also been noticing, and looking at the age of the crowd here, is something that an increasing number of 20, 30-somethings are looking for today's racing. And this day at Aintree is a manifestation of that.
Look, I mean, I love horses so much. I go weak at the knees when I see a horse. I just think they're the most beautiful animal to grace our planet. We are blessed to have them. And so I do always bet on the Grand National. I can't help myself, but I'm devastated when I see a horse fall. I'm devastated, especially when that horse has to be put down. I don't like seeing rough play with the whip. I don't like when I hear, whether it be in dressage or show jumping or point-to-point or steeplechasing or flat racing, learning of trainers who abuse their horses. But how much is there animal cruelty in this sport? Or how good are the standards? Can someone like me, who's got a real soft spot for horses, rest assured that actually, by and large, it's a rarity? Oh. We might have lost Rupert there. We were having a few difficulties with the line. That was my most important question. So we'll see if we can get him back. I also wanted to ask him for his tip for the National. I've already seen a few I like the sounds of. But let's do some messages. In the interim, I can see Ted on the blower through the window there of the gallery to see if we can reconnect with Rupert. I don't know. I mean, are you a fan of horse racing? Do you know much about cruelty in the sport? I think that, you know, standards have increased immeasurably since the outset. And a lot of those people who work with horses have a real understanding and attachment to them. Look, Rupert is back. Let's put that question to him again. I waffled on a bit there, Rupert. What I was trying to ascertain from you is, you know, when it comes to cruelty in horse racing, is it a vanishing rarity, or is there a concern that needs to be addressed?
I think, of course, in every walk of life, there are bad apples, and you just know. But in the main, if you go to every training establishment in this country, you will find these horses are given 5-star treatment and cared for like nothing else. Yes, there are examples, and you will never completely eradicate, and they are a blot on the landscape. But in the main, you know, there is something like 90,000 horses raced. The percentage of horses that die on a racecourse is something like 0.2. It's infinitesimal compared to the number of horses that actually race. So it is, in the main, look, it's anything like that is a negative. But when you look at in the big picture, it is not, you know, it is a sport that cares deeply about its main, you know, the horse. Without horses, we have no sport. We have to care for the horses, and that's what trainers the length and breadth of this land do. But as I say, there will always be someone who perhaps has not adhered to the rules, and they deserve not to be anywhere near the sport of horse racing.
I couldn't agree more. Very quickly, Rupert, who would be your tip for tomorrow?
Well, it's the grey horse. One grey horse in the race, so everyone can follow it easily. And I, as commentator, will be probably mentioning it a lot, I hope. And that horse is Marble Sands. At a big price each way, I think can run into the money, and you should collect some a return on your investment. Fingers crossed for Marble Sands.
Amazing. Yeah, I always back the grey as well. Can't believe there's only just one, so that one will definitely be on my betting slip. Rupert, thank you ever so much. Hello, Mr. Collins.
Hello.
Hiya.
How are you?
I'm good, I'm
liked
fine. I'm grand.
Your Mandelson caveat at the beginning of the show.
What's your caveat? It's in the...
Because I met him as well.
I've never actually met him.
And
I'm going to do a press conference to make that clear.
He's a very, very charming man, but I met him, but nothing happened. I'm just saying.
What about Jeffrey Epstein? Have you been to his island?
Never went to the island.
On the Lolita Express?
Never went on the Express.
Now, anyone else you want to publicly divorce yourself to save your sterling reputation today?
Who did I meet?
Other than me?
Other than you, Alex, yeah. And again, we've met many times.
Well,
at the odd
we're meeting
libation
right now.
together, you know, everything's fine.
Yeah.
Everything's tickety-boo.
Is indeed. Do you flush on the National?
Do you know what? I do not understand. I've never been in a betting shop in my life. I've got no...
Really?
I'm completely... I don't know what the word is. Like, you tell me it's 5 to 2, 7 to 3. I have no idea what
That's maths. I can't do maths either.
I do not understand.
You've never done a bet on the National?
I've done it in the workplace, you know, sweepstake thing.
Yeah.
You know, everybody shoves a fiver in or whatever. I've done that, but I wouldn't understand what to ask.
Oh, I think it's the most exciting thing. I always go by the name, the colours, and whether the